Margaret Washington's stomach cramped as she pressed her face against the locked bedroom door. The smell drifted up from the kitchen below, roasted chicken her favorite. She hadn't eaten in 4 days. "Can you smell it, old woman?" Vanessa's voice came through the wood, dripping with venom. "I made extra tonight. A whole feast." Margaret heard her daughter-in-law's heels clicking closer, then stopping right outside. The lock rattled, teasing. Through the crack beneath the door, she saw Vanessa's shadow. "Such a shame you're not hungry." The footsteps retreated downstairs. Then came the sound that shattered Margaret's soul, the garbage disposal grinding loudly, destroying every bite of that meal. Vanessa was making sure she heard it. Making sure she knew. Starvation wasn't an accident. It was a weapon. Before we continue, please subscribe to our channel and stay until the very end of this story. Comment below what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story has traveled. Now, let's begin. The grinding stopped. Margaret pressed her ear harder against the door, her breathing shallow. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. She knew what that silence meant. Another meal destroyed. Another opportunity for survival gone. Her knees buckled. She caught herself on the doorframe, her fingers white-knuckled against the wood. 68 years old, and this is what her life had become. A locked room, a locked door, a daughter-in-law who smiled like an angel and had the heart of a demon. Margaret shuffled to the bed and collapsed onto it. The mattress springs groaned under her weight, though there wasn't much weight left to support. She'd lost 43 pounds in 8 weeks. She knew the exact number because Vanessa had weighed her last Tuesday, making a show of concern. "Margaret, you're wasting away. Why won't you eat? Daniel is going to be so upset with me if something happens to you." But nothing Vanessa offered was edible. Burned eggs, spoiled milk, meat left out overnight. And when Margaret refused, Vanessa documented everything. "You see, doctor, she won't eat. I'm so worried about her mental state." Margaret's stomach cramped violently. She pressed both hands against her abdomen, trying to massage away the pain. 4 days since her last real meal. Or was it 5 times? Stopped making sense when you were starving. She looked at the antique sewing box on the nightstand. Her mother's, her grandmother's before that. Inside were pearl buttons from dresses worn by women who'd survived slavery, survived Jim Crow, survived poverty, that made this locked room look like luxury. Margaret opened the box with trembling hands. The buttons gleamed in the afternoon light. She picked one up, smooth, cool, solid. She brought it to her lips, just to feel something, just to imagine. She placed it on her tongue. The button was small, smaller than a vitamin. It slid down her throat easily. Her stomach stopped cramping for exactly 3 seconds. The sensation of something, anything going down, felt like a miracle. She reached for another, then another, then another. By the time she stopped, 7 pearl buttons sat in her empty stomach like stones at the bottom of a well. Downstairs, Vanessa reclined on the leather sofa in Daniel's study, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice honey-sweet. "Mother, you should see this house. 5 acres, indoor pool, wine cellar. Daniel spares no expense." She paused, examining her reflection in the window. Yes, Margaret's still here, unfortunately. She stood and walked to Daniel's desk, running her finger along the polished mahogany. Dementia. That's what I'm telling everyone. She refuses to eat, talks to herself, makes wild accusations. The doctor agrees she's declining rapidly. Daniel doesn't know yet. He's been in San Francisco for 3 weeks. Product launch on Tuesday. Vanessa smiled at a family photo on the desk, then turned it face down. By the time he gets home, she'll be too weak to contradict my story. A knock interrupted her. "Hold on." Vanessa covered the phone. "What?" Rosa Jenkins appeared in the doorway, her weathered face creased with worry. The housekeeper had worked for the Washington family for 30 years. She'd been there when Daniel was born. She'd been there when his father died. She'd watched Margaret work 3 jobs to put that boy through MIT. And now she was watching Margaret die. "Mrs. Washington, I made sweet potato soup. Miss Margaret's favorite. Can I please take some up to her?" No. But ma'am, she needs... I said no, Rosa. Vanessa's voice could have frozen water. Margaret is on a restricted diet per her doctor's orders. Are you questioning her doctor? Rosa's hands twisted in her apron. She wanted to scream. She wanted to grab Vanessa by her designer blouse and shake the truth out of her. But Rosa had a grandson in college. She had rent to pay. She had bills that never stopped coming. And Vanessa knew it. No, ma'am, I just thought... Don't think. That's not what I pay you for. Vanessa set down her phone. Actually, Rosa, I've been meaning to discuss the kitchen situation. I'm changing all the locks, security purposes. From now on, you'll work from the guest house kitchen. I'll bring supplies out to you each morning. Rosa's heart stopped. The guest house was 50 yards from the main house. Once those locks changed, she'd have no way to help Margaret. No way to sneak her food. No way to check if she was still breathing. Mrs. Washington, please. How will I... That's all, Rosa. You can go. Rosa backed out of the study, her mind spinning. She pulled her cell phone from her pocket with shaking hands. Her grandson Marcus was home from Howard University for the weekend. Smart boy, studying computer engineering. He'd know what to do. She typed quickly, "Emergency. Come now. Bring your camera." Marcus arrived 20 minutes later, his laptop bag slung over his shoulder. Rosa met him at the service entrance, glancing over her shoulder every few seconds. "Grandma, what's wrong? You sounded..." "She's killing her Marcus. Mrs. Vanessa is killing Miss Margaret, and nobody will listen to me." Marcus had heard his grandmother talk about Miss Margaret his whole life, how she'd helped raise him after his parents died, how she'd tutored him in math when he was failing, how she'd told him he could be anything, do anything, go anywhere. Where is she? "Third floor, East Wing, locked in, hasn't eaten in days." Rosa's voice broke. "I tried to call Mr. Daniel, but all the phones go through her now. I tried to slip food under the door, but she's watching me. Marcus, I'm scared. I'm so scared." Marcus set down his bag and pulled out equipment that looked like it belonged in a spy movie. Tiny cameras, recording devices, wireless transmitters. "We need proof. Something Mr. Daniel can't ignore. Something that will hold up in court if it comes to that." "Court? Baby, this is his wife, his mother. He won't believe..." "He'll believe video evidence. Trust me, Grandma. But I need you to keep Mrs. Vanessa distracted. Can you do that?" Rosa nodded, wiping her eyes. "What do you need me to do?" 15 minutes later, Rosa knocked on the study door. "Mrs. Washington, I'm sorry to disturb you, but there's a problem with the outdoor kitchen. The stove won't light. I think we need to call a repairman." Vanessa sighed dramatically. "Fine. Show me." As soon as Vanessa left through the back door, Marcus moved. He took the stairs 3 at a time, his sneakers silent on the carpet. The third-floor hallway stretched before him, lined with closed doors. He found Margaret's room by the new industrial lock that had been installed on the outside. His stomach turned. "You locked people in from the outside when you wanted to keep them prisoner." He knocked softly. "Miss Margaret, it's Marcus, Rosa's grandson. Can you hear me?" Silence. Then a rustling sound. Then a voice so weak he almost missed it. "Marcus? Little Marcus?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm not so little anymore. I'm in college now. Howard University, like you said I should." He pressed his mouth close to the door crack. "Miss Margaret, I need you to stay quiet for a few minutes. I'm installing cameras to document what's happening. But you can't let Mrs. Vanessa know. Can you do that?" "Cameras. Why would you?" "Because my grandma says Mrs. Vanessa is hurting you, and I believe her. But Mr. Daniel needs to see proof. He needs to see what's really happening when he's not here." Margaret's breath hitched. "Daniel. When is Daniel coming home?" 4 more days." 4 more days. Margaret slid down the door until she was sitting on the floor. 4 more days might as well be 4 more years. Marcus worked quickly. He installed a camera above the doorframe angled to capture anyone who entered. Another in the hallway outside, motion activated. A third near the bathroom vent with audio capabilities. Each device was wireless, streaming directly to his encrypted laptop. Everything would be recorded. Everything would be saved. Everything would be evidence. He heard footsteps on the stairs. Vanessa returning. He grabbed his equipment and slipped into a linen closet just as she rounded the corner. Through the crack in the closet door, he watched her approach Margaret's room. She carried nothing. No food, no water, just her phone and her cruelty. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. Margaret was sitting on the bed, her hands folded in her lap. She looked up when Vanessa entered, her eyes hollow. "I've been thinking about your situation," Vanessa said, perching on the edge of the dresser. "You're not getting any better, are you? The not eating, the confusion, the paranoia?" "I'm not confused, I'm starving." "See? There you go again with the accusations. Margaret, I've brought you food every single day. You're the one who refuses to eat it. You're the one who throws it at me, who claims it's poisoned, who says I'm trying to hurt you." Vanessa pulled out her phone and began scrolling through photos. "I have documentation of every meal I've prepared for you, every time you've refused, every incident of your aggressive behavior." She turned the phone to show Margaret. Photo after photo of elaborate meals. Beautiful presentations, except Margaret had never seen any of them. They were staged photos created for this exact moment. "When Daniel gets home, I'm going to show him these. I'm going to show him how hard I've tried, how difficult you've been. And then I'm going to suggest that you need professional care. A memory facility. Somewhere they can monitor you 24 hours a day. Somewhere they can force-feed you if necessary." Margaret's voice came out as a whisper. "Why do you hate me?" For a moment, real emotion crossed Vanessa's face. Rage. Pure, undiluted rage. "You want to know why? Fine. Let me tell you a story." Vanessa stood and began pacing. "When I first met Daniel at that charity gala in Manhattan, I thought I'd found the perfect man. Successful, handsome, rich. But then he opened his mouth and all he talked about was you. My mother this, my mother that. She sacrificed everything. She's my hero. She's the strongest woman I know." She stopped pacing and stared at Margaret. "Do you know what it's like to be with a man who worships his mother, who measures every woman against her? I could never be as good as you. I didn't sacrifice enough. I didn't struggle enough. I had the audacity to be born into a family where my parents actually loved me and paid for my education. That's not my fault. No, but it became my problem. I tried to compete with you. I tried to be the perfect wife. But nothing was ever enough. He'd still call you every Sunday. Still fly you out for holidays. Still introduce you to his business partners as the woman who made him who he is. I was his wife, but you were his world." Vanessa's voice dropped to a whisper. "So I decided that if I couldn't compete with you, I'd erase you. Slowly. Carefully. One photo at a time. One phone call at a time. One holiday at a time. And now, one meal at a time." Margaret stared at her daughter-in-law, and understanding dawned. This wasn't about hate. This was about jealousy. Vanessa wasn't trying to hurt Margaret because she disliked her. She was trying to eliminate her because she couldn't stand being second place in Daniel's heart. "Daniel will find out," Margaret said. "He'll see what you've done. Maybe, but by then you'll be in a facility upstate, drugged and docile, and I'll be the devoted wife who visits you every month bringing flowers and tears. I'll tell everyone how hard it is to watch you decline, how guilty Daniel feels for not noticing sooner, how we're doing everything we can." Vanessa smiled. "And maybe after a year or two you'll just fade away. Old people do that in those places. They lose the will to live. It's very sad, very natural, very convenient." She walked to the door, then paused. "Oh, I almost forgot." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a single apple. She set it on the dresser just out of Margaret's reach. "In case you get hungry." The door locked behind her. In the linen closet, Marcus had recorded everything. His hands shook as he stopped the recording and checked the file. Crystal clear video. Perfect audio. Proof. He waited until Vanessa's footsteps faded, then slipped out and down the back stairs. His grandmother was waiting in the kitchen, her face pale with worry. "Did you get it?" "I got it, all of it." Marcus opened his laptop and showed her the footage. Rosa covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "That evil woman. That evil, evil woman. We need to send this to Mr. Daniel, right now. She controls all the phones, all the email. How? I have his direct line. Remember Miss Margaret's birthday party last year? He gave me his cell number, told me to call if I ever needed anything." Marcus pulled out his phone. He said, "You're family, Marcus. You're always family." His finger hovered over Daniel's contact, but then he paused. "Grandma, if I send this now, Mr. Daniel will fly home immediately. He'll confront Mrs. Vanessa. She'll deny everything. She'll say the video is edited or taken out of context. We need more. We need to show a pattern, a timeline. Days of evidence, not just one conversation." Rosa understood, but her heart broke. "That means Miss Margaret has to survive 4 more days. I don't know if she can." "Then we make sure she can. Starting now." Rosa pulled food from the refrigerator. Bread, cheese, fruit, water bottles. Marcus helped her pack everything into a canvas bag. "How do we get it to her?" "The door is locked, and Mrs. Vanessa watches everything." Marcus thought for a moment, then looked up at the ceiling. "The ventilation system. These old houses, the vents connect between rooms. If we can access the vent in the room below hers, we can send food up through the shaft." They spent the next hour carefully, quietly removing the vent cover in the guest room below Margaret's bedroom. The shaft was narrow, but navigable. Marcus tied packages of food to a rope and slowly hauled them up to the vent in Margaret's room. Upstairs, Margaret heard a scraping sound coming from the bathroom. She dragged herself off the bed and into the small space. The vent cover was moving. Then it popped open and a package wrapped in a pillowcase dropped through. She opened it with shaking hands. Bread, cheese, a banana, a bottle of water, a note in Rosa's handwriting. "Hold on. Help is coming. We love you." Margaret sobbed. She tore into the bread, shoving pieces into her mouth so fast she nearly choked. The cheese tasted like heaven. The water felt like life itself pouring down her throat. She ate half, then forced herself to stop. She had to ration. 4 more days. She had to survive 4 more days. She wrapped the remaining food carefully and hid it behind the loose panel in the bathroom wall that she'd discovered last week. Vanessa searched the bedroom regularly, but never checked the bathroom thoroughly. That night, Marcus stayed at the house. His grandmother made up a bed for him in the staff quarters. He kept his laptop open, monitoring the camera feeds. At 11 p.m., Vanessa made a round through the house, checking locks, setting alarms. She stopped outside Margaret's door. "Sleep well, Margaret. Sweet dreams." The cruelty in her voice made Marcus's blood boil. At 2 a.m., Vanessa returned. She unlocked the door and entered Margaret's room. Margaret was asleep, exhausted from hunger and stress. Vanessa stood over the bed, staring down at her mother-in-law. Marcus's camera captured everything. The cold calculation in Vanessa's eyes. The way she checked Margaret's pulse as if measuring how much longer she had. The way she adjusted the thermostat, making the room colder. "Just a few more days," Vanessa whispered. "Then you'll be too weak to fight. Too weak to tell your story. And I'll finally have what I deserve." She left, locking the door behind her. Marcus saved the footage, his jaw clenched. 3 more days. They needed 3 more days of evidence. Then Daniel Washington would see exactly who he'd married. The next morning, Margaret woke to the sound of the lock turning. Vanessa entered carrying a breakfast tray. Eggs, toast, orange juice. It looked perfect. "Good morning, Margaret. I made you breakfast. I hope you'll eat today. I'd hate to have to tell Daniel you're still refusing food." She set the tray on the dresser and left. Margaret approached cautiously. The eggs looked fine. The toast was slightly burned but edible. The orange juice smelled right. She picked up the fork, took a bite of eggs. They tasted like cardboard, but they were food. She took another bite. Then her stomach revolted. She barely made it to the bathroom before vomiting. The eggs came back up along with bile and acid. She retched until there was nothing left. The eggs had been laced with ipecac. Not enough to kill her. Just enough to make her sick. Just enough to make her lose what little nourishment she'd managed to keep down. Margaret rinsed her mouth and stumbled back to bed. She reached behind the bathroom panel and pulled out the bread Rosa had sent. She took small bites, letting each piece dissolve slowly on her tongue. The vomiting had weakened her, but the bread helped. Downstairs, Vanessa was on the phone with Daniel. "Honey, I'm worried about your mother. She's not eating again. She threw up breakfast this morning. I think we need to discuss next steps when you get home." Pause. No. I don't think you need to come home early. There's nothing you can do right now anyway. Finish your lunch. We'll deal with this together when you're back. Pause. I love you too. Yes, I'm taking good care of her. I promise. She hung up and smiled. Marcus recorded every word. That afternoon, Rosa managed to slip away from the guesthouse kitchen. She'd told Vanessa she needed cleaning supplies from the main house. She climbed the back stairs to the third floor, carrying a mop and bucket as cover. She knocked softly on Margaret's door. "Miss Margaret, it's Rosa. Are you okay? Did you get the food?" Margaret dragged herself to the door. "Rosa, yes, thank you. But she's poisoning the food she brings. Made me sick this morning." "I know. Marcus recorded it. We're gathering evidence. Just 3 more days. Can you make it 3 more days?" "I don't know. I'm so weak. The buttons I swallowed more buttons, Rosa. I don't know how many. 7, maybe 8. I couldn't help it. I was so hungry." Rosa's heart shattered. "Oh, baby. Okay, listen to me. We're going to get you out of here. Marcus is talking to a lawyer friend. We're building a case, but you have to hold on. You have to be strong just a little longer. Tell Daniel, tell him I love him. Tell him I'm sorry I couldn't be stronger. You are strong. You're the strongest woman I know. Don't you dare give up." Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Vanessa returning. Rosa grabbed her mop and started cleaning her back to Margaret's door. "Rosa, what are you doing up here?" "Cleaning, Mrs. Washington. The third-floor hallway hadn't been done in a week." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "I don't remember asking you to clean up here." "Just being thorough, ma'am." "Well, you're done now. Go back to the guest house." Rosa left, but not before pressing her hand briefly against Margaret's door. A silent promise. A silent prayer. That night, Margaret woke to stomach cramps so severe she couldn't breathe. The pearl buttons were shifting, cutting into her stomach lining. She tasted blood in the back of her throat. She crawled to the bathroom and vomited again. This time, blood came up. Dark red, almost black. She stared at it in the toilet bowl, her vision blurring. This was it. She was dying. Vanessa had won. She thought about Daniel as a little boy. 5 years old, coming home from kindergarten with a drawing. "Look, Mama, I drew our family. That's you, and that's me, and that's Daddy in heaven watching us." She'd hung that drawing on the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like an apple. It had stayed there for 10 years, fading in the sunlight, curling at the edges, but she'd never taken it down. She wondered if Daniel still had it somewhere. If he remembered those days when it was just the two of them against the world. She wondered if he'd cry at her funeral. She wondered if Vanessa would wear black and play the grieving daughter-in-law. No. She couldn't think like that. She had to survive. For Daniel, for Rosa, for Marcus, for all the women who'd come before her who'd survived worse. She pulled herself up using the sink, rinsed her mouth, and stumbled back to bed. She pulled out the hidden food and forced herself to eat. Small bites, slow chews. Her stomach protested, but she persisted. She would survive. She had to. 2 more days until Daniel came home. 2 more days until the truth came out. 2 more days. Marcus stayed up all night monitoring the cameras. He'd captured 72 hours of evidence now. Vanessa starving Margaret. Vanessa poisoning her food. Vanessa's confession about her plan. Vanessa's late-night visits where she stood over Margaret like a predator watching prey die. He'd also discovered something else while hacking into Vanessa's computer. Financial records, bank transfers. Vanessa had been siphoning money from Margaret's trust fund for 18 months. Small amounts at first, then larger. Over $200,000 total. She wasn't just eliminating a rival, she was committing theft. Marcus compiled everything into a single encrypted file. Video evidence, audio recordings, financial documents, medical records showing Margaret's rapid weight loss, photos of the industrial lock on the bedroom door, Rosa's testimony, his own testimony. Tomorrow, Daniel Washington would board a plane in San Francisco. Tomorrow, he'd fly home to Connecticut. Tomorrow, he'd walk into his house expecting to celebrate a successful product launch. Instead, he'd discover that he'd married a monster. Margaret woke on the morning of Daniel's return with a strange sense of peace. She'd survived. Barely, but she'd survived. She heard Vanessa on the phone downstairs, her voice sugary sweet. "Yes, darling, I'll pick you up from the airport. I've missed you so much. And Daniel. There's something we need to discuss about your mother, but it can wait until you're home. I don't want to worry you while you're traveling. Just know that I've done everything I can for her. Everything." Margaret smiled grimly. Yes, Vanessa had done everything she could. Everything to break her. Everything to kill her. Everything to steal her son. But she'd failed. Margaret was still here, still breathing, still ready to tell her story. She heard the front door open and close. Vanessa leaving for the airport. The house fell silent. Then footsteps on the stairs. Quick. Light. Rosa. The lock turned. The door opened. Rosa rushed in and fell to her knees beside the bed. "Oh, Miss Margaret. Oh, my sweet girl. Look at you. Look what she's done to you." Margaret reached out and touched Rosa's face. "I'm okay. I'm still here." Marcus called Mr. Daniel last night. Sent him everything. Every video. Every recording. Every piece of evidence. Mr. Daniel knows everything. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "He knows. He knows. And Miss Margaret, he's not coming home to celebrate. He's coming home to save you." At JFK Airport, Daniel Washington stepped off his private jet with a face like stone. He'd been awake for 36 hours straight, watching the videos Marcus had sent. Watching his wife starve his mother. Watching his mother swallow pearl buttons because she was so desperate for food. Watching the woman he loved reveal herself as a monster. He hadn't called Vanessa, hadn't warned her. He wanted to see her face when she realized her game was over. His driver was waiting. "Home, Mr. Washington." "No, Mercy General Hospital, now." "Sir, my mother needs medical attention. Call ahead. Tell them Margaret Washington is coming in by ambulance. Tell them it's an emergency. Tell them to call the police." "The police, sir." "Elder abuse. Attempted murder. Financial theft. I want officers waiting when we arrive." At the Connecticut estate, Rosa had packed a bag for Margaret. Clothes, photos, the sewing box with the remaining pearl buttons. Everything Margaret would need. "We're getting you out of here before she comes back. Marcus is bringing his car around." Margaret let Rosa help her down the stairs. Each step was agony. Her body was so weak, so damaged. But she kept moving. They were halfway to the front door when they heard it. A car in the driveway. Vanessa returning early. "She must have gotten suspicious," Rosa whispered. "Quick, the back door." But it was too late. Vanessa walked in her Prada purse slung over her shoulder, her sunglasses perched on her head. She stopped when she saw them. Margaret emaciated and barely standing. Rosa supporting her weight. The packed bag on the floor. For 3 seconds nobody moved. Then Vanessa smiled. That terrible cold smile. "Going somewhere. Margaret." The three of them stood frozen in the foyer. Margaret barely able to stand, leaning heavily on Rosa's arm. Rosa, her face pale with terror. Vanessa blocking the front door, her designer purse still hanging from her shoulder. For 5 seconds, nobody breathed. Then Vanessa's smile widened. She set her purse down on the marble console table slowly, deliberately. She pulled out her phone. Rosa, step away from her, now. Rosa's grip on Margaret tightened. No, ma'am, I won't. I said step away, or I'm calling immigration. Your grandson Marcus is here on a student visa, isn't he? It would be a shame if someone reported that he's been working illegally, installing security cameras without proper licensing, breaking and entering, theft of proprietary information from my personal computer. Rosa's face went white. Marcus had his whole future ahead of him. Howard University, a degree in computer engineering, a chance his parents never had. Don't you dare bring my grandson into this. Then step away from Margaret and go back to the guest house where you belong. Margaret felt Rosa's hands start to shake. She turned her head slightly, her voice barely a whisper. Go, Rosa. It's okay. I'll be fine. Miss Margaret, I can't leave you with her. I can't. You have to. For Marcus. I'll be okay. Daniel's coming home today, remember? Just a few more hours. Rosa's eyes filled with tears, but she understood. She'd raised a grandson alone after her daughter died. She knew what it meant to protect your child's future, even when it cost you everything. She released Margaret's arm and stepped back. Margaret swayed, grabbing the wall for support. Her legs were so weak. The pearl buttons in her stomach felt like rocks weighing her down, pulling her toward the floor. Vanessa watched Rosa retreat, satisfaction gleaming in her eyes. Then she turned her attention to Margaret. Well, well, trying to run away were we? After all I've done for you, after I've taken such good care of you. You've starved me, poisoned me, locked me in a room like an animal. Prove it. Vanessa's voice was silk over steel. Go ahead. Tell Daniel when he gets home. Tell him his devoted wife has been abusing his poor, confused mother. Let's see who he believes. The woman he married who has documentation of every meal prepared, every doctor's visit scheduled, every attempt to help. Or the elderly woman who throws food refuse as medication and shows clear signs of dementia. Margaret straightened as much as she could, drawing on reserves of strength she didn't know she still had. 70 years of surviving in a world that tried to break her. 70 years of being told she didn't matter. 70 years of proving them all wrong. He'll believe me, because I'm his mother, because he knows me, because I raised him to recognize truth when he hears it. Vanessa laughed. The sound was cold, brittle. You really think so? Let me tell you something about your precious son. Daniel doesn't know you anymore. The woman who scrubbed floors. The woman who worked 3 jobs. She's a memory, a story he tells at fundraisers. My mother sacrificed everything. But that woman, she's dead to him. She died the moment he got successful enough to stop seeing poor people as people. That's not true. Daniel isn't like that. Isn't he? When was the last time he called you, without me reminding him? When was the last time he came home for a holiday that wasn't strategically convenient for his schedule? When was the last time he asked about your life, your health, your happiness without checking his watch? Each question was a knife. Each one found its mark, because Margaret knew the answers. She'd felt the distance growing for years, even before Vanessa arrived. Success had changed Daniel, not in obvious ways, but in small ones. The way he'd stopped calling on Sundays. The way he'd started sending money instead of time. The way he'd looked relieved when Vanessa suggested Margaret move in with them because it meant he didn't have to worry anymore. Someone else would handle it. Someone else would take care of Mom. He loves me, Margaret whispered, but her voice cracked. He loves the idea of you, the symbol, the poor black mother who sacrificed everything so he could become a tech billionaire. That's a great story. Very marketable. But the reality of you, the aging woman with needs and opinions, and a mouth that won't stay shut. That's inconvenient. Vanessa stepped closer, and Margaret could smell her perfume. Chanel. Expensive. Everything about Vanessa was expensive. Here's what's going to happen. You're going back upstairs. You're going to stay in that room until Daniel gets home. And when he arrives, I'm going to tell him that you've had a severe decline. That you tried to escape this morning confused and disoriented. That I had to stop you from wandering into traffic. Rosa will confirm it, won't you, Rosa? Rosa, standing by the kitchen door, said nothing. And then Vanessa continued. Daniel and I will have a very sad conversation about next steps, about memory care facilities, about how sometimes the kindest thing we can do for people we love is let professionals handle them. I'll tell him everything. The locked door, the starvation, the what, the delusions, the paranoia. Margaret, I've been documenting your mental decline for months. I have videos of you talking to yourself, videos of you refusing to eat, videos of you becoming aggressive when I try to help. By the time I'm done, Daniel will be signing commitment papers. Margaret felt her knees start to buckle. This couldn't be happening. After everything she'd survived, she couldn't let this woman win. But Vanessa was right about one thing. Daniel had changed, and Margaret didn't know if the man her son had become would believe his mother over his wife. Then, Rosa's voice cut through the room. Small, but steady. He already knows. Vanessa turned slowly. What did you say? Mr. Daniel already knows. Everything. My grandson sent him video evidence last night. Every conversation, every meal you destroyed, every time you locked that door, every word of your confession about why you hate Miss Margaret. He's seen it all. The color drained from Vanessa's face. You're lying. Am I? Call him. Ask him why he's not answering your calls. Ask him why he changed his flight to arrive 3 hours early. Ask him why he told his driver to go to the police station first. Vanessa fumbled for her phone. Her hands were shaking now. She pulled up Daniel's number and called. It rang, and rang, and rang. Then went to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. Her carefully constructed mask began to crack. Panic flashed across her features, quickly replaced by rage. You stupid old woman! You had no right. That computer was password protected. My grandson's very smart. Top of his class in computer engineering. You really should have used a more complex password than your birthday. Vanessa's hand shot out and grabbed Margaret by the throat. Not hard enough to leave marks, but hard enough to cut off air. Margaret gasped, clawing at Vanessa's wrist. You've ruined everything. Everything I worked for. Everything I built. Rosa screamed and rushed forward, but Vanessa shoved Margaret away. Margaret fell, hitting the marble floor hard. Pain exploded through her hip, her shoulder, her head. Mrs. Vanessa, stop. You're killing her. Good. That was the plan anyway. Just took longer than I wanted. Rosa pulled out her phone, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. Vanessa lunged for it, but Rosa was faster. She ran toward the kitchen, the phone pressed to her ear. 911, what's your emergency? Please, I need help. 47 Meadowbrook Lane in Greenwich. A woman is being attacked. She's elderly. She's been starved and abused. Please hurry. Please. The operator's voice was calm, professional. Ma'am, I need you to stay on the line. Officers are being dispatched. Can you get somewhere safe? Vanessa was advancing toward the kitchen, her face twisted with fury. Rosa backed up until she hit the counter. No, I can't leave her. She'll kill Miss Margaret if I leave her. On the floor of the foyer, Margaret tried to push herself up. Her arms gave out. The pearl buttons in her stomach shifted, cutting deeper into her stomach lining. She tasted blood in the back of her throat. She thought about the women who came before her. Her grandmother born into slavery, who'd learned to read in secret and taught others at risk of death. Her mother, who'd walked through white neighborhoods cleaning houses, holding her head high even when people spat at her. Generations of black women who'd survived by being stronger than anyone thought possible. She would not die on this floor. Not today. Not at the hands of this woman. Margaret reached out and grabbed the leg of the console table. She pulled herself up inch by agonizing inch. Her vision blurred, her head spun, but she kept moving. Vanessa didn't notice. She was too focused on Rosa, on silencing the witness who could destroy her. Hang up the phone, Rosa. Hang it up now, or I swear to God. Or what you'll do what you've been doing to Miss Margaret for months. You think I'm afraid of you? My people survived worse than you could ever dream of. You're nothing. Nothing but a spoiled woman who can't stand not being the center of attention." Vanessa's hand closed around a knife from the counter. A chef's knife, 8 inches long, gleaming under the kitchen lights. Rosa froze. The 911 operator's voice came through the phone, tinny but urgent. "Ma'am? Ma'am, what's happening? Talk to me." "She has a knife," Rosa whispered. Margaret saw it all unfold in slow motion. Vanessa raising the knife. Rosa backing into the corner. The phone falling from Rosa's hand, clattering on the tile floor. And Margaret knew. She knew that Rosa had saved her life, had risked everything for her, had chosen to protect her over protecting herself. Now it was Margaret's turn. She grabbed the heavy crystal vase from the console table. Her hands could barely hold it. It must have weighed 10 pounds. Her grandmother's vase brought from Alabama in 1952, the only thing that survived the move north. Margaret took 3 stumbling steps toward the kitchen. Vanessa's back was to her, all her focus on Rosa. "You should have minded your own business, old woman." "Miss Margaret was my business. She's been my family for 30 years. That's 30 years more than you've been here." Vanessa raised the knife higher. Margaret swung the vase with every ounce of strength she had left. It connected with the back of Vanessa's head with a sickening crack. Crystal shattered. Water and flowers exploded across the kitchen. Vanessa dropped to her knees, the knife falling from her hand. She turned, dazed, blood trickling down her neck from where a shard of crystal had cut her. Her eyes focused on Margaret standing over her, breathing hard, the broken vase stem still clutched in her hands. "You hit me. You actually hit me." "I did what I had to do, the way I always have." Vanessa tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. She slumped against the cabinet, touching the back of her head, staring at the blood on her fingers. "Daniel will never forgive you for this. Never." "Maybe. But at least I'll be alive to ask for forgiveness." Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Rosa rushed to Margaret's side, helping her stay upright. "Miss Margaret, you need to sit down. You're bleeding. Your head—" "I'm fine. I'm okay." "You're not fine. None of this is fine. But you're alive. You're alive, and help is coming." The sirens grew louder. Red and blue lights flashed through the front windows. Car doors slammed. Heavy footsteps pounded up the front walk. "Police, open up!" Rosa ran to unlock the door. 3 officers burst in, hands on their weapons, eyes scanning for threats. "In here, in the kitchen, she has a knife." 2 officers rushed past, finding Vanessa still on the floor, dazed and bleeding. One of them kicked the knife away out of reach. The other knelt beside her. "Ma'am, stay still. Paramedics are right behind us." The 3rd officer approached Margaret and Rosa. He was young, maybe 30, with kind eyes that took in Margaret's emaciated frame, her hollow cheeks, her barely there grip on consciousness. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Rodriguez. Can you tell me your name?" "Margaret. Margaret Washington." He pulled out a notepad, but his eyes never left her face. "Mrs. Washington, we got a 911 call about an assault. Can you tell me what happened here?" Before Margaret could answer, Vanessa's voice rang out from the kitchen floor. Even injured, even caught, she was still performing. "Officer, thank God you're here. These women attacked me. I came home to find them robbing the house. I tried to stop them, and the old woman hit me with a vase. She's dangerous. She has dementia. She doesn't know what she's doing." The officer's expression didn't change. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stay quiet while I take statements from everyone involved. But I'm the victim here. Look at me. I'm bleeding. And the paramedics will take care of that. But right now I need you to remain silent." Another officer emerged from the 3rd floor. In his hand was a digital recorder. Marcus's recorder, the one he'd hidden in the air vent. "Rodriguez, you need to hear this. There's hours of footage, and it's bad." The paramedics arrived, flooding the house with efficient movement. One team went to Vanessa. Another team came to Margaret. A young woman with dark hair pulled into a ponytail knelt beside Margaret, her hands gentle as she checked vitals. "Ma'am, I'm Sarah. I'm going to take care of you, okay? Can you tell me when you last ate?" "I don't know. Days. Maybe 4, maybe 5. Sarah's jaw tightened. She looked at her partner, a man with gray hair and tired eyes. John, I need an IV. Normal saline. And call ahead to Mercy General. Tell them we're bringing in a suspected elder abuse case. Severe malnutrition. Possible internal injuries. John moved fast already on the radio. Sarah turned back to Margaret. We're going to get you to the hospital. You're going to be okay, but I need you to stay with me. Can you do that? Margaret nodded, but her eyes were drifting closed. She was so tired. So tired. Margaret, stay awake. Tell me about your family. You said your name is Washington. My son, Daniel. He's coming home today. I need to see him. I need to tell him. You'll see him, I promise. But first we need to get you stable. They loaded Margaret onto a stretcher. As they wheeled her toward the ambulance, she saw Vanessa being placed in handcuffs. The officers were reading her rights, but Vanessa wasn't listening. She was staring at Margaret with pure hatred. This isn't over. You think you've won, but you haven't. I'll get the best lawyers. I'll make sure everyone knows you attacked me, that you're a violent, delusional old woman. Daniel will believe me. He always believes me. Officer Rodriguez pulled Vanessa to her feet. Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. As they put Vanessa in the police car, she was still screaming, still threatening, still believing she could talk her way out of this. The ambulance doors closed, shutting out the chaos. Sarah inserted an IV into Margaret's arm, securing it carefully. Your vitals are weak, but you're stable. We're going to take good care of you. Rosa climbed into the ambulance behind them. I'm coming with her. She shouldn't be alone. No one argued. The ambulance pulled away from the estate sirens wailing. Through the back window, Margaret could see police officers surrounding the house. Crime scene tape going up. More cars arriving. She closed her eyes, feeling the IV fluids entering her system. Cold at first, then spreading warmth through her dehydrated body. Rosa. I'm here, Miss Margaret. I'm right here. Thank you. For everything. For Marcus. For the food. For not giving up on me. You don't thank family. You just love them. Margaret's lips curved into the smallest smile. Family. Not by blood, but by choice. By loyalty. By love that survived when everything else fell apart. The hospital came into view. Mercy General, where Daniel had been born 43 years ago. Where Margaret had labored for 27 hours alone because Daniel's father was working a double shift and couldn't get away. Where she'd held her newborn son and promised him a better life than she'd had. She'd kept that promise. He'd graduated MIT, built a company worth billions, changed the world. But somewhere along the way, they'd lost each other. The ambulance doors opened. Hospital staff rushed out, taking over from the paramedics. They wheeled Margaret inside, calling out medical terms she didn't understand. Rosa tried to follow, but a nurse stopped her. I'm sorry, ma'am. Family only past this point. I am family. I'm all the family she has right now. The nurse looked at Rosa's uniform, at her dark skin, at the clear devotion in her eyes. And something in her face softened. Okay, but you'll need to stay in the waiting area until we get her stabilized. It could be several hours. Rosa nodded and found a seat in the waiting room. She pulled out her phone and called Marcus. Grandma? What happened? I heard sirens. It's over. Miss Margaret's safe. Mrs. Vanessa's been arrested. And your cameras. They recorded everything. The police have all the evidence they need. Marcus let out a breath he'd been holding for days. Is Miss Margaret going to be okay? I don't know, baby. But she's alive. And she's fighting. That's all we can ask for right now. Rosa ended the call and sat back in the uncomfortable plastic chair. Around her, the hospital buzzed with activity. People coming and going, emergencies and recoveries, life and death playing out in endless cycles. She thought about the first time she'd met Margaret Washington 30 years ago. She'd been hired to clean the small apartment in Harlem where Margaret and 5-year-old Daniel lived. 3 rooms, 1 bathroom, roaches that wouldn't die no matter how much she cleaned. But Margaret had treated her like a person, had offered her coffee, had asked about her life, her daughter, her dreams, had paid her extra when she didn't have to. When Rosa's daughter died in that car accident, when Rosa was drowning in grief and didn't know how to raise a 10-year-old boy alone, Margaret had been there, helping with homework, watching Marcus after school, teaching him that he mattered, that he could be anything. Margaret had saved Marcus's life just by caring about it. Now Marcus had saved hers. The waiting room door opened. A doctor emerged, pulling off latex gloves. He was older, maybe 60, with gray hair and glasses. Family of Margaret Washington. Rosa stood up so fast she almost fell. Yes, I'm her. I'm Rosa Jenkins. How is she? The doctor's face was serious. She's alive, but her condition is critical. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, internal bleeding from foreign objects in her stomach. We're taking her to surgery immediately to remove them. Foreign objects. What kind of? Pearl buttons. She swallowed 9 pearl buttons. They've been cutting into her stomach lining. If we don't remove them now, she could develop sepsis or die from internal hemorrhaging. Rosa covered her mouth. 9 buttons. Miss Margaret had been so desperate for food that she'd swallowed buttons. Will she survive the surgery? I don't know. Her body is extremely weak. The surgery itself is risky, but if we don't operate, she'll die within hours. Do you know how to reach her next of kin? We need consent. Her son, Daniel Washington. He's flying in from San Francisco. He should be landing any minute. We can't wait. Under emergency circumstances, we can proceed without consent, but someone needs to call him. He needs to get here as fast as possible. Rosa nodded, fumbling for her phone. She scrolled through her contacts until she found Daniel's number, the one Miss Margaret had made her save years ago. Just in case, Margaret had said. Just in case something happens and you need to reach him. The phone rang twice before Daniel answered. Hello, his voice. After months of Vanessa intercepting every call, Rosa finally heard his voice. Mr. Daniel, it's Rosa Jenkins. Rosa, what's wrong? Where's my mother? The police told me she was being taken to Mercy General, but I'm still at JFK. Traffic is... She's in surgery, Mr. Daniel. They're removing buttons from her stomach. Pearl buttons. She was so hungry she swallowed her own grandmother's buttons. Silence on the other end. Then a sound that might have been a sob. I'm coming. Tell her I'm coming. Tell her I'm sorry. Just tell her to hold on, please. I will. But Mr. Daniel, you need to hurry. The doctor said it doesn't look good. I'm 10 minutes away. Tell them not to give up on her. Tell them whatever it costs, whatever they need, just save her. Please, Rosa. Please. The call ended. Rosa stood there holding the phone, tears streaming down her face. A hand touched her shoulder. She turned to find Marcus standing there, his laptop bag over his shoulder, his eyes red. I couldn't stay away, Grandma. I had to come. Rosa pulled him into a hug. They stood there in the waiting room, holding each other, waiting for news that could break them or heal them. Upstairs in the operating room, Dr. James Chen made the first incision. Margaret Washington's body was so frail, so depleted, that every cut felt like it might be too much. His surgical nurse, a woman named Patricia, who'd worked with him for 15 years, looked at him across the table. Dr. Chen, her heart rate is dropping. BP is 80/40. Give me another unit of blood and call cardiology. We might need them on standby. He worked carefully, opening Margaret's stomach. What he found made him want to weep. The buttons were embedded in the stomach lining, some cutting through to deeper tissue. Blood pooled in her abdominal cavity. How does someone survive this? Patricia whispered. By being stronger than anyone realizes, Dr. Chen replied. He began removing the buttons one by one, each extraction delicate and precise. In the waiting room, the clock ticked forward. Rosa and Marcus sat side by side, not speaking, just existing in shared fear. The automatic doors burst open. Daniel Washington ran in his suit, rumpled his tie, askew his face a mask of terror and guilt. Where is she? Where's my mother? Rosa stood. Surgery, third floor. They've been operating for 40 minutes. Daniel didn't wait for more information. He ran to the elevator, slamming the button repeatedly, as if that would make it arrive faster. The doors opened. He stepped in. And as they closed, Rosa saw his reflection in the steel doors. She saw a man who'd built an empire, finally understanding that he'd lost sight of his foundation. The elevator climbed. Daniel's heart pounded. He'd watched Marcus's videos on the flight, every minute of them. Watching his wife starve his mother. Watching his mother swallow buttons because she was desperate. Watching Rosa risk everything to save a woman who'd already saved so many. How had he missed this? How had he been so blind? The elevator doors opened onto the surgical floor. A nurse looked up from her station. "I'm Daniel Washington. My mother, Margaret Washington, is in surgery. I need to see her." "Sir, she's still in the OR. You'll have to wait until—" "I said I need to see her. Now!" His voice carried the authority of a man who'd never been told no. But the nurse had seen that authority 1,000 times, and it didn't impress her. "Sir, if you interrupt that surgery, you could kill your mother. Dr. Chen is the best we have. Let him work. The waiting room is down the hall to your left." Daniel's legs gave out. He sank into a chair outside the operating room, his head in his hands. Through the small window in the OR door, he could see movement. Doctors and nurses in blue scrubs working over a body so small it barely made a shape under the surgical drapes. That was his mother, the woman who'd given him everything. And he'd repaid her by letting his wife torture her. The door opened. Dr. Chen emerged, pulling off his surgical mask. Blood stained his scrubs. Daniel jumped to his feet. "Is she—" "She's alive. We removed all 9 buttons. Repaired the damage to her stomach lining. She lost a significant amount of blood, but we got it under control." Dr. Chen paused. "Mr. Washington, your mother is one of the strongest people I've ever operated on. Most patients in her condition wouldn't have survived this long. Whatever she's been through, whatever kept her fighting, it saved her life." Daniel's vision blurred. "Can I see her?" "She's being moved to recovery. Give us 30 minutes to get her settled then, yes. But Mr. Washington, she's going to need months of recovery, physical therapy, psychological support. What happened to her doesn't heal overnight. Whatever she needs, whatever it takes, money's no object." Dr. Chen's expression hardened slightly. "Money won't fix this. Time will. Presence will. Actually being there for her will. Can you do that?" The question hit like a slap. Daniel nodded, unable to speak. 30 minutes later, a nurse led him to recovery room 304. She paused outside the door. "She's awake but very weak. Don't upset her. Don't make her talk too much. Just be there. That's what she needs." Daniel pushed open the door. The room was dim, lit only by monitors and the fading afternoon sun through half-closed blinds. And there in the bed was his mother. She looked like a skeleton. Her cheekbones jutted out sharply. Her arms were thin as branches. The hospital gown hung off her frame. IVs ran into both arms. A breathing tube helped her breathe. But her eyes were open, and when she saw him, they filled with tears. "Mom," his voice broke. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." He crossed the room and fell to his knees beside her bed, taking her hand in both of his. Her skin was paper-thin cold. Margaret's lips moved. No sound came out at first. Then barely a whisper. "You came." "Of course I came. Mom, I saw the videos. I know what she did. I know what I let happen. This is my fault. All of it." Margaret shook her head slightly. Even that small movement seemed to exhaust her. "Not your fault. You didn't know." "I should have known. I should have called more, visited more. I should have seen the signs. But I was so focused on work, on building the company, on—" His voice cracked. "I forgot about the person who built me." Tears ran down Margaret's hollow cheeks. "You were busy. You were making something important. Nothing is more important than you. Nothing." They stayed like that, hands clasped, tears falling, words that had been trapped for years, finally breaking free. Outside the room, Rosa and Marcus watched through the window. Rosa wiped her eyes. "He's a good man. He just forgot for a while." Marcus nodded. Miss Margaret never forgot. That's why she survived. She was waiting for him to remember. Inside, Daniel lifted his mother's hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I'm not leaving. Not for work, not for anything. I'm staying right here until you're better. And then you're coming home. A real home. Not that house with her. Somewhere safe. Somewhere you'll never be hurt again." Margaret's eyes closed, fresh tears squeezing out. "The buttons," she whispered. "They were Grandma's, from her wedding dress. I swallowed our history." Daniel understood. Those buttons represented generations of survival, and his mother in her desperation had tried to consume that strength. "We'll get them back. I told the doctor to save them. We'll have them cleaned and preserved, and one day when you're ready, we'll turn them into something beautiful. Something that reminds us that we survived. We. You and me, Mom. We're in this together now, the way we always should have been." Margaret's breathing slowed, deepened. The surgery, the emotion, the relief, it was all too much. She drifted toward sleep. Daniel stayed kneeling beside her bed, holding her hand, watching the monitors. Each beat of her heart was a promise. Each breath was a second chance. He would not waste it. 3 hours passed. Daniel never moved from Margaret's bedside. His phone buzzed constantly in his pocketboard, members, investors, media requests, but he ignored all of it. His mother's hand remained in his, her breathing steady but shallow. A knock on the door broke the silence. A police detective entered, a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much. "Mr. Washington, I'm Detective Lisa Moreno. I need to ask you some questions about your wife." Daniel looked up, his jaw tight. "Ask whatever you need." Detective Moreno pulled out a notepad, but her eyes stayed on Margaret's frail form. "How long has your mother been living with you and your wife?" 14 months. Vanessa suggested it after we got married. Said Mom was getting older, shouldn't be alone in Harlem. I thought it was kind. I thought—" His voice broke. "I thought my wife cared about her." "When was the last time you saw your mother in person?" Daniel had to think. The answer made him sick. 6 weeks ago, maybe 7. I've been in California working on a product launch. And during those 6 weeks, did you speak to your mother on the phone? Twice, maybe 3 times. The calls were always short. Vanessa said Mom was tired, needed rest. I believed her." Detective Moreno wrote something down. "Did your mother ever express concern about her living situation? Say she was unhappy or afraid?" Daniel shook his head, then stopped. There had been something. A moment during their last video call. Margaret had looked thinner, her eyes hollow. She'd opened her mouth to say something, then glanced off camera and closed it again. "She tried to tell me once, on a video call. But Vanessa was in the room. Mom looked at her, then said everything was fine." Daniel's hands clenched into fists. She was afraid to speak. In her own son's house, she was afraid. "Mr. Washington, we have significant evidence against your wife. The video footage your employee provided shows a pattern of abuse spanning months. Starvation, psychological torture, theft from your mother's trust fund, and today, assault with a deadly weapon. The district attorney wants to press charges for attempted murder, elder abuse, and financial exploitation." "Good. Press them all. I want her prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." Detective Moreno's expression softened slightly. "I have to ask. Did you have any knowledge of what was happening? Any suspicion at all?" "No. God, no. If I'd known." Daniel stood pacing to the window. "I trusted her. I loved her. I thought she loved my mother too. How could I have been so blind?" Abusers are often very good at hiding what they do. They isolate their victims. They manipulate the narrative. Your wife is extremely intelligent and very calculating. She documented fake evidence of trying to help your mother while systematically destroying her. Daniel turned back. What happens now? Your wife is being held without bail. Given the severity of the charges and the risk that she might flee the judge-denied bond, her arraignment is scheduled for Monday. You'll likely be called to testify. I'll be there. Whatever you need, I'll do it. Detective Moreno nodded and turned to leave, then paused. Mr. Washington, your mother is a remarkable woman. Most people wouldn't have survived what she went through. The fact that she's still alive, still fighting that, takes extraordinary strength. After the detective left, Daniel returned to his mother's bedside. Margaret's eyes were open now, watching him. You heard all that? She nodded slightly. Mom, I need to know. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why didn't you call me? Text me. Find some way to let me know what was happening. Margaret's voice was barely audible. She controlled everything. The phones, the computer, the doors. And I was afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid you wouldn't believe me. Tears slipped down her cheeks. You loved her so much. You were so happy. I didn't want to be the bitter old mother-in-law who couldn't accept your wife. I thought maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I was being paranoid. She kept saying I was confused, that I was sick. After a while, I started to believe her. Daniel felt like someone had reached into his chest and crushed his heart. Mom, no. I would have believed you. I would have. Would you have really? Before you saw those videos, if I'd called you and said Vanessa was starving me, would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was exaggerating, being dramatic, trying to drive a wedge between you and your wife? The question hung in the air. Daniel wanted to say yes. Of course he would have believed her. But he couldn't lie. Not now. Not after everything. I don't know, he whispered. And that's what I have to live with. That my mother couldn't trust me to protect her. Margaret reached for his hand. You're here now. That's what matters. But it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. Daniel had spent his entire adult life building things, companies, products, wealth. He'd believed that success meant never having to worry about survival again. He'd escaped poverty, escaped struggle, escaped the world that had tried to break his mother. But in escaping, he'd left her behind. And someone had taken advantage of that. A soft knock interrupted them. Rosa entered carrying a small bag. Her eyes were red-rimmed but determined. Mr. Daniel, I brought some things for Miss Margaret. A nightgown, her slippers, the photo of you from her nightstand. Daniel stood and embraced Rosa, something he'd never done in all the years she'd worked for his family. Rosa, I don't know how to thank you. You saved her life. Rosa pulled back, looking him straight in the eye. I didn't do anything special. I just did what family does. What you should have been here to do. The words were gentle, but cut deep. Daniel nodded, accepting the rebuke. You're right. I should have been here. I wasn't. But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving again. Rosa's expression softened. She needs more than presence, Mr. Daniel. She needs you to see her, really see her. Not as the woman who sacrificed everything. Not as a symbol or a story, as a person, with needs and feelings and a right to dignity. I understand. Do you? Because loving someone means showing up. Not just when it's convenient. Not just when tragedy strikes. But on the boring days. The regular days. The days when nothing's wrong, but your presence still matters. Margaret's weak voice came from the bed. Rosa, don't be hard on him. He's here now. And I'm glad he is. But Miss Margaret, you taught me something 30 years ago. You said, Rosa, don't let people love you only when it's easy. Make them love you when it's hard too. Remember that? Margaret smiled faintly. I remember. Rosa turned back to Daniel. Your mama loved you when it was hard. 3 jobs, no sleep. Bleeding hands from scrubbing floors. She loved you through all of it. Now it's your turn to love her through hard things. Recovery won't be pretty. She'll need help with everything. Bathing, dressing, eating, physical therapy that hurts, Nightmares about what happened. Are you ready for that? Or are you going to hire someone to do it for you? Daniel felt the challenge in her words. The easy thing would be to hire nurses, therapists, caregivers, people to handle the difficult parts while he returned to running his company. But that's what he'd been doing his whole life, outsourcing the hard parts, delegating discomfort. I'm doing it myself, all of it. My board can run the company without me for a while, and if they can't, then I didn't build it right. Rosa studied his face, looking for sincerity. Finally, she nodded. Good, because she deserves nothing less. The next morning brought Dr. Chen's rounds. He examined Margaret, carefully checking her surgical incisions, reviewing her labs. Mrs. Washington, your body is responding well to treatment. The internal bleeding has stopped. Your blood pressure is stabilizing. We're going to reduce the pain medication and see how you handle solid foods. When can she go home? Daniel asked. Not for at least 2 weeks, maybe longer. She needs intensive nutritional support, physical therapy, psychological evaluation. Mr. Washington, your mother's body has been through severe trauma. Starvation does more than make you thin. It affects organ function, bone density, cognitive ability. She'll need months of supervised care. Daniel nodded. Whatever she needs, but when she is ready to leave, she's not going back to that house. Where will she go? I'm buying a new place, somewhere with 1 floor, no stairs, close to the hospital, and I'm moving in with her. My assistant is handling it today. Margaret's eyes widened. Daniel, you don't need to do that. You have your life, your company. My company will survive without me in the office every day. You almost didn't survive because I wasn't there. I'm not making that mistake again. Dr. Chen smiled, the first real smile he'd shown. That's exactly what she needs to hear, Mrs. Washington. Recovery is as much mental as physical. Knowing you're safe, knowing you're loved, that matters more than any medicine I can prescribe. After the doctor left, a young woman in professional attire entered. She carried a briefcase and had the bearing of someone used to difficult conversations. Mr. Washington, I'm Assistant District Attorney Catherine James. I'm handling your wife's case. Daniel stood, shaking her hand. What can you tell me? Your wife was arraigned this morning. She pleaded not guilty to all charges. Her attorney is Marcus Webb, very expensive, very good. He's already filing motions to suppress the video evidence, claiming it was obtained illegally. It wasn't illegal. Rosa's grandson had permission to be in the house. He was documenting elder abuse. I know, and we'll argue that. But Mr. Washington, I need you to understand something. Your wife has resources. She has access to your money through joint accounts. She's hiring the best defense team money can buy. This won't be a quick or easy case. I don't care how long it takes. I want her convicted. Catherine pulled out a folder. I need to prepare you for what's coming. Her defense will likely argue that your mother has dementia, that she refused food, that the weight loss was due to illness, not starvation. They'll paint your wife as a devoted caregiver dealing with a difficult patient. Margaret made a small sound from the bed. Catherine turned to her. Mrs. Washington, I know this is hard, but I need you to be strong. When this goes to trial, you'll need to testify. You'll need to tell your story. Can you do that? Margaret's voice was stronger than it had been. Yes, I can do that. I want to do that. The defense will be brutal. They'll question your memory. They'll ask about your mental state. They'll try to make you seem confused or vindictive. Are you prepared for that? I've been questioned and doubted my whole life. By social workers who thought I couldn't raise a son alone. By teachers who thought he'd never amount to anything. By people who looked at my skin and assumed I was nothing. I survived all of that. I can survive a courtroom. Catherine's respect was visible. Good. Because we're going to need that strength. Your testimony will be the heart of this case. That afternoon brought visitors. Marcus arrived with his laptop ready to show Daniel the full extent of the evidence he'd gathered. They sat in the hospital cafeteria, the laptop screen casting blue light on their faces. Mr. Washington, I documented 72 hours of abuse. This is just a sample. Marcus clicked play. The video showed Vanessa standing over Margaret's bed at 2 in the morning, checking her pulse like she was measuring how long until death arrived. The audio captured her whispered words. Just a little longer, old woman. Just a little longer, and you'll be gone. And Daniel will finally be mine alone. Daniel's hands clenched. How long was she planning this? Based on the financial records I accessed, she started siphoning money from Miss Margaret's trust fund 18 months ago. Small amounts at first, then larger. She was methodical. What was she doing with the money? Marcus pulled up bank statements. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. She was building an escape fund. I think she was planning to leave you after your mother died. Take the money and disappear. The betrayal cut deeper with every revelation. Daniel had thought Vanessa loved him, but she'd been planning an exit strategy from the beginning. There's something else. Marcus pulled up another file. I found emails between your wife and someone named Richard Castellano. They were having an affair. Daniel stared at the screen. Messages between Vanessa and another man. Plans to meet in hotels. Discussions about leaving Daniel once they had enough money. She never loved me. No, sir. I don't think she did. I think she saw opportunity. A wealthy man with a devoted mother. She could marry you, isolate the mother, take what she wanted and leave. Daniel closed the laptop. He couldn't look at anymore. Thank you, Marcus, for everything you did. You saved my mother when I failed to. I did what Miss Margaret did for me when my parents died. She showed up. She cared. She made me believe I mattered. I was just returning the favor. Still, thank you. And Marcus. When this is over, I want you to come work for me. Not as an employee. As a partner. You have skills and integrity. That's rare. Marcus smiled. Let's get Miss Margaret healthy first. Then we can talk about the future. That evening, Rosa brought dinner from home. Real food, not hospital trays. Sweet potato soup, cornbread, collard greens. She'd cooked all day preparing Margaret's favorites. Daniel helped his mother sit up, adjusting her pillows. Rosa ladled soup into a bowl, blowing on it to cool it. Small bites, Miss Margaret. Your stomach needs time to adjust. Margaret took the first spoonful. The taste of Rosa's cooking, the warmth of real food, brought tears to her eyes. It's so good. I'd forgotten what food could taste like. Where? They ate together, the three of them, in the small hospital room. No one spoke much. They didn't need to. The act of sharing a meal, something Vanessa had weaponized, became a healing ritual. Halfway through dinner, Margaret set down her spoon. I need to tell you both something. When I was locked in that room when I thought I was going to die, I wasn't afraid of death. I was afraid of dying without making things right. Mom, you don't need to. Let me finish. Daniel. I was angry at you. Angry that you'd left me there. Angry that you believed her over me. Angry that you'd chosen success over family. And that anger kept me alive. But it also poisoned me. She reached for his hand. I need to forgive you. Not because you deserve it yet, but because I deserve peace. I don't want to spend whatever time I have left carrying bitterness. Daniel's eyes filled. I don't deserve your forgiveness. No, you don't, but I'm giving it anyway. That's what love does. It forgives the unforgivable. It hopes when hope seems stupid. It shows up when showing up costs everything. Rosa wiped her eyes with her napkin. Miss Margaret, you're the strongest woman I know. Not strong. Just tired of being angry. Tired of hurt. I want to live whatever life I have left with love, not hate. The moment was interrupted by a commotion in the hallway. Raised voices. A security guard saying, "Ma'am, you can't be here." Then the door burst open. Vanessa stood there, flanked by two men in expensive suits. Her wrist was bandaged from where the handcuffs had cut her. A bruise colored her cheek from where Margaret had hit her with the vase. But her eyes were wild, desperate. Daniel, thank God. I made bail. I came as soon as I could. Baby, this is all a terrible misunderstanding. That woman, She pointed at Rosa. "She put ideas in your mother's head. She's been stealing from us. I caught her and she made up these lies to cover herself." Daniel stood slowly. His voice was ice. "Get out." "Daniel, please. You have to listen to me. I love you. I love your mother. I would never hurt her. The videos are edited. They're taken out of context. My lawyer says—" "I said get out." One of the men in suits stepped forward. "Mr. Washington, I'm Marcus Webb, your wife's attorney. My client has a right to see you. You're still legally married." "Community property laws." "I don't care about property laws. She tried to murder my mother. She's not welcome here." Vanessa's mask cracked. The desperation in her eyes turned to rage. "Your mother. Your precious mother. Do you know what it was like living in her shadow? She was all you ever talked about. Saint Margaret who sacrificed everything. I could never compete with that." "You were never supposed to compete. You were supposed to love her. She was part of my life. If you loved me, you would have loved her too." "Love her, that bitter old woman who looked down on me from day one, who told you I wasn't good enough, who tried to poison you against me." Margaret's voice cut through the room, weak but clear. "I never said you weren't good enough. I said I didn't trust you. There's a difference, and I was right not to trust you." Vanessa lunged toward the bed. The security guard grabbed her, but not before she screamed, "You ruined my life. You ruined everything. I wish you died in that room. I wish I'd never fed you at all." The confession hung in the air. The attorney's face went white. He grabbed Vanessa's arm and dragged her toward the door. "My client is distraught. She doesn't know what she's saying. Don't—" But Daniel was already on his phone. "Detective Moreno, it's Daniel Washington. My wife just showed up at the hospital and threatened my mother. Yes, she's still here. Please send officers." Within minutes, police arrived. They took Vanessa away, still screaming, still claiming innocence, even as her own words condemned her. After they left, the room fell silent. Margaret was shaking. Daniel held her, feeling how small she'd become, how fragile. "She's never coming near you again. I promise." "I believe you. But Daniel, I'm afraid. What if she gets out again? What if she comes back? Then I'll be there, and Rosa will be there, and Marcus will be there. You're not alone anymore, Mom. You're never going to be alone again." That night, Daniel refused to leave the hospital. He pulled a chair next to Margaret's bed and settled in for a long vigil. Rosa went home to rest, promising to return in the morning with more food. In the darkness, Margaret's voice came soft and uncertain. "Daniel, are you awake? I'm here. Tell me about your company. Tell me what you've built. I want to understand the life you've been living." So Daniel talked. He talked about algorithms and artificial intelligence, about board meetings and product launches, about the pressure and the competition and the constant drive to be better, faster, smarter. And then hesitantly, he talked about the cost, the relationships he'd neglected, the calls he'd ignored, the way success had become an addiction that demanded more and more until nothing else mattered. "I thought I was building a legacy," he said, "but I was just building an empire on sand. Without you, without family, without love, none of it means anything." Margaret reached out in the darkness, finding his hand. "Then build different. Build better. You're brilliant, Daniel. You always have been. Use that brilliance for something that actually matters." "Like what?" "Like making sure what happened to me never happens to anyone else. How many elderly people are trapped in their own homes? How many are being abused by people who are supposed to care for them? You have resources. You have influence. Use it." The idea took root. Daniel sat up straighter. "A foundation. Technology to help monitor vulnerable adults. AI that can detect patterns of abuse. Legal support for victims. Financial protection." "The Margaret Washington Foundation," Margaret said, a smile in her voice. "No. The Pearl Button Foundation. Because you survived by swallowing your history. Now we'll make sure others don't have to." Margaret squeezed his hand, and for the first time in months, she felt something she'd thought was lost forever. She felt hope. Outside the hospital window, dawn was breaking. A new day. A new beginning. The path ahead would be long and painful. Recovery, testimony, trial, healing that might take years. But they would walk it together, mother and son, bound not by obligation or guilt, but by love that had survived the worst and emerged stronger. In the hallway, Rosa arrived early carrying breakfast. She paused outside the door, watching Daniel asleep in the chair still holding his mother's hand. She smiled. Some things once broken could never be fully repaired. But they could be rebuilt. Different. Scarred, but still standing. Still whole. Still family. 2 weeks passed before Margaret was strong enough to leave the hospital. Daniel had kept his promise. He'd found a brownstone in Brooklyn, walking distance from Prospect Park, with wide doorways for a wheelchair and a bedroom on the ground floor. Rosa moved into the guest room without being asked. Marcus visited daily, bringing his laptop, helping Margaret rebuild her strength with physical therapy videos and gentle exercises. The house became a sanctuary. No locks on bedroom doors, no industrial bolts, no starvation, just 3 people learning to be a family again. But the peace was temporary. The trial was scheduled for 6 weeks from Margaret's discharge. 6 weeks to prepare for the fight of her life. Assistant District Attorney Catherine James visited on a Tuesday afternoon. She brought files, evidence, photos, a timeline of abuse that made Daniel physically ill to review. She sat across from Margaret at the kitchen table, her expression both professional and compassionate. "Mrs. Washington, I need to prepare you for what's coming. Vanessa's defense team is going to attack you personally. They'll question your memory, your mental capacity, your motivations. They'll suggest you made this all up because you were jealous of your son's wife." Margaret's hands shook slightly as she held her tea. The tremor never fully went away, a permanent reminder of what starvation had done to her nervous system. "Let them come. I know what happened. I know what she did." Knowing and proving are different things. In court, under cross-examination, you'll be exhausted, confused. They'll twist your words, make you doubt yourself. "I've been doubted before." Catherine leaned forward. "Not like this. Marcus Webb is one of the best defense attorneys in the country. He'll make you cry on that stand. He'll make you look unreliable. And if he succeeds, Vanessa walks free." Daniel slammed his hand on the table. "Then we make sure he doesn't succeed. What do we need to do? Practice. Mock cross-examinations. Over and over until Mrs. Washington can answer questions without hesitation. Until her story is so consistent, so detailed, that no lawyer can shake it." For the next month, Catherine came 3 times a week. She played the role of Marcus Webb, asking cruel questions, attacking Margaret's character, suggesting she was lying for attention or money. "Mrs. Washington, isn't it true that you've always resented your son's success?" "No, I'm proud of everything he's accomplished." "Really? Because you lived in a 3-room apartment in Harlem while he built a billion-dollar company. That must have hurt. Must have made you feel abandoned." "It didn't. Daniel earned everything he has." "Then why did you move into his house? Why did you give up your independence? Was it because you wanted to control him again? The way you controlled him when he was a child?" Margaret's hands clenched. "I moved in because Vanessa suggested it. She said it would be easier for everyone." "Or did you move in because you couldn't stand the idea of your son loving someone more than he loved you?" "That's not true." "Isn't it? You admitted to me that you never liked Vanessa. You thought she wasn't good enough for Daniel. You tried to break them up from the beginning." "I was concerned. I saw something in her that worried me." "You saw a young, beautiful woman taking your son's attention away from you, and you couldn't handle it." The sessions were brutal. Margaret often left them in tears, shaking, doubting whether she could survive the real trial. But Catherine never let up. "This is mercy compared to what Marcus Webb will do. He'll be worse, crueler. And you can't break, not once, because if you break, she wins." Rosa watched these sessions from the kitchen doorway, her face tight with anger. After one particularly harsh practice, she confronted Catherine in the hallway. "You're hurting her. Every time you come here, she's exhausted for days." "I know, but if I don't hurt her now, Marcus Webb will destroy her in court. And then everything she survived will be for nothing." There has to be another way. There isn't. The video evidence is strong, but Vanessa's team is fighting to have it suppressed. If it gets thrown out, all we have is Mrs. Washington's testimony. It has to be perfect. Rosa had no answer to that. She went back inside where Margaret sat at the table, her head in her hands. "Miss Margaret, you don't have to do this. You can refuse to testify. The DA can try the case without you." Margaret looked up, her eyes red but determined. "And let her go free. Let her hurt someone else." "No, I'm testifying. I survived for a reason. This is it." 3 weeks before the trial, Daniel received a call from Marcus Webb. Vanessa's attorney wanted to meet. Alone. They met at a cafe in Manhattan Neutral Territory. Webb was in his 60s, silver-haired, with the confidence of a man who rarely lost. He ordered an espresso and got straight to business. "Your wife wants to make a deal." Daniel's jaw tightened. "She's not my wife anymore. I filed for divorce 2 weeks ago." "Technically, you're still married until the divorce is final." "But that's not why I'm here. Vanessa is willing to plead guilty to lesser charges. Elder abuse, not attempted murder. In exchange, she wants a reduced sentence. 5 years instead of 25. No. Mr. Washington, think about what a trial will do to your mother. She'll be torn apart on the stand. Every detail of her suffering will be made public. The media will turn this into a circus. Is that what you want for her? What I want is for Vanessa to pay for what she did." Webb sipped his espresso, studying Daniel over the rim. "Let me be frank. The video evidence is compelling, but my team has found inconsistencies. The cameras were installed without proper consent. The footage could be ruled inadmissible. Rosa and Marcus had every right to install those cameras. They were protecting my mother." "That's debatable. And even if the footage stands, your mother's testimony is problematic. She's elderly. She was severely malnourished. Her memory could be questioned. A good defense can create reasonable doubt." Daniel leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm being realistic. Vanessa's facing life in prison. She has nothing to lose by fighting this. And when desperate people fight, they fight dirty. She'll claim your mother was mentally ill. That she begged Vanessa not to feed her because she wanted to lose weight. That the pearl buttons were swallowed intentionally as a suicide attempt. We have a psychiatrist ready to testify that your mother shows signs of Munchausen syndrome." "That's insane." "It's defense strategy. And juries love alternative explanations. All we need is one juror who believes our story. One person who thinks maybe, just maybe, your mother wasn't as helpless as she claims." Daniel stood up. "Tell Vanessa she can rot in prison. We're going to trial." Webb didn't seem surprised. He pulled a business card from his pocket and slid it across the table. "When you change your mind, and you will, after you see what we do to your mother on that stand, call me. The offer expires the day before trial starts." Daniel left the cafe, his hands shaking with rage. Webb was right about one thing. The trial would destroy his mother all over again. But letting Vanessa take a plea deal felt like a betrayal of everything Margaret had suffered through. That evening, he told Margaret about the meeting. She listened quietly, her face unreadable. "What do you want to do, Mom?" "This is your decision." Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice steady. "When I was young, maybe 25, I was cleaning houses in Connecticut. Rich families. One of them had a daughter, maybe 16. Beautiful girl. I saw bruises on her arms one day. Her father's handprints." She paused, remembering. "I wanted to report it, but the other housekeepers told me not to. Said it wasn't my business. Said I'd lose my job and the family would just deny it. So I stayed quiet. And that girl? She ran away 6 months later. I heard she died of an overdose before she turned 20. Margaret looked at Daniel. "I stayed quiet once because I was afraid. because speaking up costs too much. I won't make that mistake again. Vanessa doesn't get a deal. She goes to trial. And if I have to be destroyed on that witness stand to make sure she pays for what she did, then that's what happens. Mom, you don't have to. Yes, I do, not just for me. For every elderly person trapped in their own home. For every victim who's told to stay quiet because fighting back is too hard. I'm done being quiet. The trial began on a cold Monday in November. The courthouse was packed with media spectators, people who'd followed the story and wanted to see justice served. Daniel sat in the front row, Rosa beside him, Marcus on the other side. They formed a wall of support for the woman who'd been brought in through a side entrance to avoid the cameras. Margaret entered the courtroom in a wheelchair, though she could walk short distances now. Catherine had advised it. Let the jury see how much damage was done. Let them see the frailty, the weakness that Vanessa had exploited. Vanessa sat at the defense table in a modest gray suit, her hair pulled back, minimal makeup. Her team had coached her well. She looked like a victim herself, a woman falsely accused, heartbroken by betrayal. Judge Patricia Morrison called the court to order. She was a black woman in her 70s, stern-faced, with a reputation for running a tight courtroom. She looked at the defendant, then at Margaret, and something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps, of shared history, of understanding what it meant to survive in a world that underestimated you. The State of New York versus Vanessa Clark Washington. The defendant is charged with attempted murder, elder abuse, financial exploitation, and assault with a deadly weapon. How does the defendant plead? Marcus Webb stood. Not guilty, Your Honor. The trial began. Catherine's opening statement was powerful, laying out a timeline of systematic abuse. She showed photos of Margaret before Vanessa arrived, healthy, smiling, vibrant. Then photos taken in the hospital, skeletal, hollow-eyed, barely alive. The evidence will show that Vanessa Washington deliberately starved her mother-in-law over a period of months. That she locked her in a room, poisoned her food, and documented fake evidence of care while committing abuse. That she stole over $200,000 from Margaret Washington's trust fund. And that when confronted, she attempted to kill both Margaret and Rosa Jenkins with a knife. This is not a story of a difficult patient and a frustrated caregiver. This is attempted murder. Marcus Webb's opening was equally compelling. He painted Vanessa as a devoted wife overwhelmed by an elderly woman's declining mental health. The defense will show that Margaret Washington suffered from advancing dementia. That she refused food, refused medication, became violent and accusatory. That Vanessa Washington tried everything, doctors, nutritionists, psychiatric care to help her mother-in-law. But Margaret Washington's illness was beyond anyone's ability to manage. The buttons she swallowed. A desperate act by a woman who'd lost touch with reality. The weight loss self-inflicted. The accusations, delusions created by a diseased mind. Vanessa Washington is not a monster. She's a woman who tried to help and was accused of crimes she never committed. The first week of trial focused on medical evidence. Dr. Chen testified about the buttons, the internal damage, the severity of malnutrition. The defense tried to suggest Margaret had swallowed the buttons intentionally, but Dr. Chen shut that down. In my 30 years as a surgeon, I've seen many suicide attempts. This wasn't one. The buttons were swallowed over time, suggesting desperation for food, not a desire to die. Additionally, Mrs. Washington fought to survive throughout her ordeal. That's not consistent with suicidal ideation. Rosa testified next. She described the gradual isolation, the changed locks, the destroyed meals. Marcus Webb tore into her on cross-examination. Mrs. Jenkins, you've worked for the Washington family for 30 years, correct? Yes, sir. And you were loyal to Margaret Washington. I still am. So loyal that you might lie to protect her. Rosa's eyes flashed. I don't need to lie. The truth is enough. But you installed cameras in your employer's home without permission. You accessed private areas. You essentially spied on Mrs. Vanessa Washington. That's not loyalty. That's obsession. I did what I had to do to save Miss Margaret's life. Or did you do it because you resented that a new woman had taken a prominent role in the household? Because Vanessa Washington was replacing you as the primary caretaker. That's not true. Isn't it? You even moved into their new home after this incident. You're living with the Washington family right now. How convenient. You destroy Vanessa Washington's reputation and you get to keep your position. Catherine stood. Objection. Counsel is testifying. Sustained. Mr. Webb asks questions, don't make speeches. But the damage was done. Webb had planted doubt. Was Rosa a hero or a jealous employee? Marcus Washington testified about the video evidence explaining the technical details of the cameras. Webb tried to discredit him too, suggesting he'd edited the footage, manipulated timestamps, created false evidence. Mr. Jenkins, you're a computer engineering student, correct? Yes, sir. So you have the technical skills to alter video footage. I could, but I didn't. How can we be sure you could have edited these videos to show anything you wanted, removed context, changed the narrative? The videos are time-stamped and encrypted. Any tampering would be visible in the metadata. Your own expert examined them and found no alterations. Webb moved on quickly, but he'd made his point to the jury. Technology could be manipulated. On Friday of the second week, Catherine called her star witness. The state calls Margaret Washington. The courtroom fell silent. Everyone had been waiting for this moment. Margaret rose from her wheelchair, refusing Daniel's offered hand. She walked to the witness stand slowly, carefully, but under her own power. She wanted the jury to see that she was strong, that she was credible. She was sworn in and sat down, her hands folded in her lap. Catherine approached gently. Mrs. Washington, can you please state your full name for the record? Margaret Louise Washington. And how old are you? 68. Mrs. Washington, I know this is difficult, but I need you to tell the jury what happened to you. Start from the beginning. When did you move into your son's home? Margaret took a breath. April of last year. Vanessa suggested it. She said I shouldn't be alone at my age, that they had plenty of room. Daniel agreed. I thought it would be nice to be close to my son again. And at first, how was it? Good. We had dinners together, watched movies. It felt like family. When did things change? After Daniel left for his first long business trip. Maybe a month after I moved in. Vanessa came to my room one night and told me the house rules. Catherine pulled out a notebook. The house rules that Rosa Jenkins testified about. Yes, specific meal times, no guests, no phone calls after 8 p.m. Things that made me feel like I was living in someone else's house instead of my son's. Did the restrictions get worse? Margaret nodded. Every week something new. She changed my internet password, said I was using too much bandwidth. She took my cell phone, said the radiation was bad for my health. She fired my doctor and hired a new one I never met. When did the food restrictions start? Margaret's voice wavered. Maybe 2 months in. She said I was gaining weight, that it was unhealthy. She put me on a diet, but the portions kept getting smaller, and then sometimes there would be no food at all. What did you do when there was no food? I asked her for something to eat. She'd say she'd already fed me, that I was confused, that I was forgetting. Did you believe her? At first, yes. I thought maybe I was getting forgetful. But then I realized I wasn't confused. I was being starved. Catherine showed photos to the jury. Margaret at different stages of weight loss. The transformation was shocking. Mrs. Washington, why didn't you call your son? Why didn't you ask for help? I tried, but she controlled all the phones, all the computers, and when I did manage to talk to Daniel, she was always in the room watching me. I was afraid if I said something, she'd make it worse. Worse how? She threatened to have me committed, said if I caused trouble, she'd tell Daniel I had dementia and needed to be in a facility. I was terrified of being locked away in some institution where no one knew me. So you stayed silent. I tried to survive. I waited for Daniel to come home. I thought when he saw me in person, he'd know something was wrong. But he didn't come home for weeks. Why? Vanessa kept extending his trips, business emergencies, delayed launches, things that kept him on the other side of the country. Catherine paused, letting the jury absorb that. Then she moved to the hardest part. Mrs. Washington, tell the jury about the pearl buttons. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. They were my grandmother's. From her wedding dress. She was married in 1889 after emancipation. Those buttons represented freedom, survival. I kept them in a sewing box by my bed. Why did you swallow them? I was so hungry. I couldn't think straight. I'd been locked in my room for days with no food. I opened the box and saw the buttons. They looked like candy, like something I could eat. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop myself. I just needed something in my stomach, something to make the pain stop. How many buttons did you swallow? 9, over several days. Did you know they could kill you? I didn't care anymore. I thought I was going to die anyway. At least this way I'd die with something inside me. The courtroom was dead silent. Several jurors were crying. Even Judge Morrison looked affected. Catherine continued. Mrs. Washington, on the day you were taken to the hospital, what happened? Rosa tried to help me escape. We packed a bag and tried to leave. But Vanessa came back early. She caught us. What did she do? She grabbed me by the throat. Said I'd ruined everything. Rosa called 911 and Vanessa grabbed a knife from the kitchen. She was going to kill us both. How did you stop her? I hit her with a vase, my grandmother's vase, the only thing I had left from my past. I broke it over her head. Do you regret it? Margaret looked directly at Vanessa. Only that I didn't do it sooner. Catherine sat down. No further questions. Now came the hard part. Marcus Webb approached the stand, his expression sympathetic but calculating. He held a thick folder. Mrs. Washington, good afternoon. I'm sorry you're going through this ordeal. Margaret said nothing, waiting. Mrs. Washington, you testified that you were locked in your room, but there was no lock on the inside of the door, was there? No, the lock was on the outside. Where is this lock now? I don't know. The police didn't find any lock on that door when they investigated. In fact, there's no evidence that a lock ever existed. Isn't that correct? Catherine stood. Your Honor, the lock was removed before police arrived. We have testimony from Officer Rodriguez that the door showed recent installation holes. I'll allow the question, Judge Morrison said. But the witness can clarify. Margaret spoke up. The holes were there. I saw them install the lock. Just because they took it down doesn't mean it never existed. Webb smiled. Of course. Now, Mrs. Washington, you testified that you tried to call your son but couldn't. Yet phone records show you spoke to Daniel 3 times during his absence. How do you explain that? Vanessa let me talk to him sometimes, but she was always listening. I couldn't tell him what was happening. Or could you tell him but you chose not to, because nothing was actually happening? That's not true. Mrs. Washington, you lived in that house for 14 months. During that time you had access to a landline, correct? Sometimes. And you could have called 911 at any time. She watched me constantly. But she wasn't with you every moment. She had errands, appointments, times when you were alone. Why didn't you call for help then? Margaret's hands shook. This was the question Catherine had warned her about. The one that made her look complicit in her own abuse. I was afraid. Afraid she'd make it worse. Afraid no one would believe me. Or afraid that if you called, authorities would investigate and find no evidence of abuse. Because there was no abuse. There was abuse. I have scars. I have trauma. I almost died. Webb pulled out medical records. Mrs. Washington, these are your medical records from before you moved in with your son. They show a history of depression, anxiety. Is that correct? Yes. After my husband died, I struggled. And you were prescribed antidepressants. Yes. Which you stopped taking after moving into your son's home. Why? Vanessa said I didn't need them, that they were making me confused. Or did you stop taking them because you wanted to, because you didn't think you needed them? Catherine objected. Speculation? Sustained. But Webb had made his point. He continued, Mrs. Washington, depression can cause loss of appetite, correct? Yes, but it can cause weight loss. Yes. It can cause paranoia, feelings that people are against you. I wasn't paranoid. She was actually starving me. Or you were depressed, stopped eating, and blamed my client for your own mental health struggles. Margaret's voice rose. No, that's not what happened. Mrs. Washington, you admitted to swallowing pearl buttons. That's not normal behavior, is it? I was starving. Or you were suffering from a mental health crisis. Pica, the compulsion to eat non-food items is a known symptom of severe psychological distress. I wasn't crazy. I was hungry. Then why did you swallow 9 buttons over several days instead of just asking for food? I did ask. She said no. But you just testified that Mrs. Vanessa Washington brought you meals. That they were inadequate, but they existed. So you were getting some food. Yet you still swallowed buttons. Why? Margaret was crying now, frustrated, exhausted. Because I was desperate. Because I couldn't think straight. Because starvation does things to your mind. Or because you were mentally ill and needed help that my client tried to provide. Catherine stood. Objection. Argumentative. Sustained. Mr. Webb, move on. Webb looked at the jury, letting Margaret's emotional state speak for itself. Then he delivered his final blow. Mrs. Washington, you testified that you loved your son, that you wanted him to be happy. But you never liked Vanessa, did you? I didn't trust her. You told your son not to marry her. I expressed concerns. You tried to break them up. I wanted him to be careful. And when he married her anyway, you resented it. You moved into their home to keep an eye on her, to try to drive a wedge between them. No. And when that didn't work, you created this elaborate fiction about abuse. You starved yourself. You made yourself sick. All to destroy your son's marriage. That's a lie. Is it because the alternative is that a successful, educated woman with no history of violence suddenly decided to murder her mother-in-law for no reason? Which story makes more sense to you? Margaret was shaking, tears streaming down her face. She tried to kill me. I'm telling the truth. Or you're telling the story you've convinced yourself is true. No further questions. Webb sat down looking satisfied. Margaret had fallen apart on the stand exactly as he'd planned. Catherine did redirect, trying to rehabilitate her witness, but the damage was done. The jury had seen Margaret break. They'd seen her look confused, emotional, unreliable. As Margaret left the stand, Daniel met her at the gate. She collapsed into his arms, sobbing. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I tried to stay strong. You were strong, Mom. You told the truth. That's all we can do. But as they left the courtroom that day, Daniel saw the doubt in people's eyes. The whispers, the speculation. Maybe the old woman was crazy. Maybe Vanessa was telling the truth. The trial was far from over, and for the first time, Daniel wasn't sure they would win. That night, Margaret refused to eat. She sat at the kitchen table staring at the soup Rosa had made, her hands trembling too hard to lift the spoon. I failed. I looked weak up there. Crazy. Just like he wanted me to. Daniel knelt beside her chair. You told the truth. That's all that matters. The truth doesn't matter if no one believes it. Margaret's voice cracked. I saw their faces. The jury. They think I'm a delusional old woman who made this whole thing up. Rosa set down her own bowl, her jaw tight. Miss Margaret, you listen to me. That lawyer is good at his job, that's all. He's paid to make lies sound like truth. But we have evidence. We have video. We have those buttons they pulled from your stomach. Webb made all of that sound explainable. Depression, mental illness, self-harm. Margaret pushed the soup away. Maybe he's right. Maybe I am crazy. Daniel grabbed her hands, forcing her to look at him. Stop. You are not crazy. You were tortured. And tomorrow Catherine is going to show the jury exactly what kind of person Vanessa really is. She's calling Richard Castellano to testify. Margaret's head snapped up. Who? Vanessa's lover. The man she was planning to run away with after you died. Marcus found their emails. Hundreds of them. Planning your death. Planning their escape. Planning how to spend my money. For the first time since leaving the courthouse, hope flickered in Margaret's eyes. Does the jury know about him? They will tomorrow. The next morning, Catherine called Richard Castellano to the stand. He was 42, handsome, in a slick way, wearing an expensive suit that couldn't hide his discomfort. He'd been granted immunity in exchange for his testimony. Catherine didn't waste time. Mr. Castellano, how do you know the defendant? We met at a charity gala 2 years ago, started an affair about 6 months later. Were you aware she was married? Yes. Did that bother you? Richard shifted. Not really. She said her marriage was loveless, that she'd married Daniel for security but didn't love him. Did she ever discuss her mother-in-law with you? All the time. She hated Margaret, said the old woman was poisoning Daniel against her, said she'd never be free as long as Margaret was alive. The courtroom erupted. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. Order, Catherine continued. Did the defendant ever suggest harming Margaret Washington? At first it was just talk. I wish she'd die. I wish she'd disappear. But then about 8 months ago, Vanessa started getting serious. She asked me if I knew anyone who could make it look like an accident. What did you say? I told her no. I thought she was joking. But she kept bringing it up. She had this whole plan. Starve the old woman slowly so it looked like natural decline. Document fake evidence of dementia. Then when Margaret was weak enough, arrange a fall down the stairs. She said no one would question it. Old people fall all the time. Margaret felt sick. It hadn't been random cruelty. It had been premeditated murder. Did you report this to authorities? No, I should have, but I didn't. Richard looked at the jury. I was in love with her, or I thought I was. She made me believe we were going to have a life together. That once Margaret was gone and she had access to Daniel's money, we'd leave the country. Start over in Costa Rica. Were you involved in the abuse of Margaret Washington? No. I never went to the house. Never met Margaret. But I knew what was happening. Vanessa would text me updates. She's down to 90 pounds. She swallowed something today. Maybe she'll choke and save me the trouble. She thought it was funny. Catherine pulled out printed emails and text messages. Your Honor, I'd like to enter these into evidence. Judge Morrison reviewed them, her face hardening. Admitted. Catherine displayed them on the courtroom screen. Messages between Vanessa and Richard planning Margaret's death in explicit detail. The jury stared horrified. Marcus Webb stood for cross-examination, but there wasn't much he could do. Richard Castellano had receipts, literal documentation of Vanessa's intent to kill. Mr. Castellano, you admit you were having an affair with a married woman. You admit you discussed her husband's mother's death and did nothing to stop it. Why should this jury believe anything you say? Because I kept everything, every text, every email, every voicemail. I'm not a good person, I know that, but I'm telling the truth about what she planned. Webb tried to suggest Richard was testifying to save himself to avoid prosecution. But the emails were damning, time-stamped, detailed, impossible to explain away. When Richard left the stand, Vanessa was pale, her composure finally cracking. She whispered urgently to Webb, who shook his head. There was no defense against this. Catherine called her final witness, a forensic accountant named David Chen, who'd analyzed Vanessa's financial records. Mr. Chen, what did you discover? Mrs. Vanessa Washington systematically stole money from Margaret Washington's trust fund over 18 months. Small transfers at first. $500, $1,000. But by the end, she was taking $10,000 at a time. Total theft, $237,000. Where did the money go? Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Accounts opened in Vanessa's name 3 months after she married Daniel Washington. She was planning an exit from the beginning. Daniel felt like he had been punched. Their entire marriage had been a con. She'd never loved him. She'd seen a wealthy man with a vulnerable mother and constructed an elaborate scheme to steal everything. Catherine rested her case, The evidence was overwhelming. Video footage of abuse, medical evidence of starvation, testimony about premeditated murder plans, financial records proving theft. But Marcus Webb still had a defense to present, and he surprised everyone with his first witness. The defense calls Dr. Lawrence Whitmore. A man in his 70s took the stand wearing a bow tie and wire-rimmed glasses. He had the bearing of an academic, someone used to being the smartest person in the room. Dr. Whitmore, what is your profession? I'm a psychiatrist. I specialize in geriatric mental health and delusional disorders. Have you reviewed the medical records and testimony in this case? I have. What is your professional opinion regarding Margaret Washington's mental state? Dr. Whitmore spoke directly to the jury. Based on my review, I believe Margaret Washington suffers from persecutory delusional disorder. This condition causes patients to believe they are being harmed or persecuted when no harm is actually occurring. The delusions can be extremely detailed and convincing. Catherine was on her feet. Objection. Dr. Whitmore never examined Mrs. Washington. He cannot diagnose her. Your Honor, Webb argued, Dr. Whitmore is not providing a formal diagnosis. He's offering his expert opinion based on the available evidence. Overruled. But be careful, Mr. Webb, Webb continued. Dr. Whitmore, can this disorder explain Mrs. Washington's accusations? Absolutely. Patients with persecutory delusions often fixate on a specific person as their persecutor. They interpret normal actions as malicious. A forgotten meal becomes intentional starvation. A locked door becomes imprisonment. The patient genuinely believes these things are happening. Could depression and grief trigger such delusions? Yes. Mrs. Washington lost her husband, experienced financial stress, moved into a new environment. These stressors could absolutely trigger a delusional episode. What about the pearl buttons? What would cause someone to swallow them? In cases of severe delusion combined with depression, patients sometimes engage in self-harm, not because they want to die, but because the delusion compels them. Mrs. Washington may have believed she was eating food, or she may have been subconsciously trying to create evidence to support her delusion. Margaret listened, stunned. This doctor was making her sound insane, making everything she'd suffered sound like imagination. Catherine's cross-examination was fierce. Dr. Whitmore, you never met Mrs. Washington, correct? That's correct. You never conducted a clinical interview? No. Never performed any psychological tests? No. So your opinion is based entirely on reading reports written by other people and my 40 years of experience, but not on actually examining the patient. Tell me, doctor, have you reviewed the video evidence in this case? I have. The videos show Vanessa Washington destroying food, locking doors, confessing to abuse. How does your theory of delusional disorder explain physical evidence? The videos could be misinterpreted. A woman destroying spoiled food could look like destroying fresh food. A locked door could be for safety. Context matters. And the emails between Vanessa Washington and Richard Castellano, the ones where they plan Margaret Washington's death, are those delusions too? Dr. Whitmore hesitated. Those emails are concerning, but they could be fantasy, venting frustration, not actual intent. Or they could be exactly what they appear to be, a woman planning murder. Catherine sat down, satisfied. Dr. Whitmore's testimony had some impact, but Richard Castellano's testimony was stronger. Webb's final witness was Vanessa herself. She took the stand wearing a pale blue dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked young, vulnerable, nothing like the monster the prosecution had described. Webb began gently. Vanessa, thank you for having the courage to testify. Tell the jury about your relationship with Margaret Washington. Vanessa's voice was soft, shaking slightly. I loved her. I know that sounds impossible after everything you've heard, but it's true. When Daniel asked me to marry him, I was so excited to have a mother figure in my life. My own mother died when I was young. I thought Margaret could be that for me. What happened? She rejected me from the start. Nothing I did was good enough. I tried to cook her favorite meals, but she said they were wrong. I tried to spend time with her, but she said I was intrusive. It hurt. I kept trying, but she seemed to hate me. Why do you think she felt that way? I think she saw me as a threat. Daniel and I were so in love. For the first time in his life, he had a partner. Margaret wasn't the center of his world anymore, and she couldn't handle that. Did you starve Margaret Washington? Never. I prepared 3 meals a day. Beautiful, nutritious meals. But she refused to eat them. She'd throw them away or knock them on the floor. I documented everything because I was scared. Scared she'd accuse me of exactly what she's accusing me of now. Did you lock her in her room? No, there was never a lock on that door. Margaret could come and go as she pleased, but she stayed in her room by choice. She isolated herself. What about the pearl buttons? Do you know why she swallowed them? Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. I came home one day and found her surrounded by buttons. She was putting them in her mouth. I tried to stop her, but she fought me. She said, "I'll show Daniel what you've done to me." I think she swallowed them to frame me, to make herself look like a victim. And the emails to Richard Castellano. Richard and I had an affair. I'm not proud of it. My marriage was struggling. Daniel was always gone. I was lonely and made a terrible mistake. The things I said in those emails about Margaret were just venting. Frustration. I never meant any of it. Did you try to kill Margaret Washington? No, never. The day she went to the hospital, I came home to find Rosa helping her leave. I was confused, scared. I reached out to steady Margaret and she hit me with a vase. Rosa called the police and made it sound like I was attacking them. But I was the one who got hurt. It was a masterful performance. Vanessa's voice cracked at all the right moments. Her tears seemed genuine. She looked like a woman wrongly accused, not a woman who'd committed attempted murder. Catherine's cross-examination had to destroy that image. She stood holding Richard Castellano's emails. Mrs. Washington, you testified that the emails to Richard Castellano were just venting. Let me read one to the jury. If the old bitch would just die already, we could be together. I'm so close. She's weak now. Maybe another week without food and her heart will give out. Does that sound like venting to you? I was angry. I didn't mean... Here's another. I'm documenting everything. When she dies, I'll be the devoted daughter-in-law who tried so hard. No one will suspect anything. That's not venting. That's planning. You're taking it out of context. What context makes planning someone's death acceptable? Vanessa had no answer. Catherine pulled out the financial records. You stole $237,000 from Margaret Washington. How do you explain that? I managed her finances. Sometimes I made transfers to cover household expenses. To accounts in your name, in the Cayman Islands. That was for investment purposes. Or for your escape with Richard Castellano. You were planning to leave Daniel take the money and disappear. Isn't that true? No. Then why did you book 2 one-way tickets to Costa Rica for December 15th, right after Margaret Washington's projected death date according to your emails? Vanessa's face went white. She hadn't known the prosecution had found the tickets. I don't know what you're talking about. Really? Because I have the booking confirmation right here. 2 tickets. Purchased with stolen funds. Explain that. Vanessa looked at her lawyer desperate. Webb was stone-faced. There was no explanation. I want my lawyer. Judge Morrison leaned forward. You're on the stand, Mrs. Washington. Answer the question. I need to speak to my lawyer first. That's not how this works. Answer the question or be held in contempt. Vanessa's composure shattered. Fine. Yes, I was planning to leave, but I wasn't going to kill anyone. I was just going to leave after Margaret died naturally. She was old. I thought she'd die on her own. The courtroom exploded. Judge Morrison banged her gavel calling for order, but the damage was done. Vanessa had just confessed to waiting for Margaret to die. Catherine pressed forward. So you admit you were hoping Margaret Washington would die? I didn't hurt her. She did this to herself. By starving, by swallowing buttons, she forced you to lock her in a room. There was no lock. Then explain the installation holes Officer Rodriguez documented. Explain the new deadbolt found in your bedroom closet, the one that matched those holes perfectly. Vanessa had no answer. She dissolved into tears, not of sadness, but of rage, of being caught, of watching her perfect plan fall apart. I tried to be good to her, but she never gave me a chance. She looked at me like I was trash, like I wasn't good enough for her precious son. So yes, I wanted her gone, but I didn't try to kill her. You just waited for starvation to do it for you. Vanessa said nothing. Tears streaming down her face, Catherine sat down. No further questions. The defense rested. Closing arguments began the next day. Catherine stood before the jury, her voice clear and strong. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is not complicated. Vanessa Washington married a wealthy man. She saw his mother as an obstacle. She systematically starved that mother over months. She documented fake evidence of care while committing abuse. She stole money. She planned an escape. And when confronted, she grabbed a knife and tried to finish what she'd started. The evidence is overwhelming. The only question is whether you'll believe it. Marcus Webb's closing was desperate grasping at doubt. The prosecution wants you to believe that my client is a monster. But what they've shown you is a woman in a difficult situation dealing with a mentally ill patient who made mistakes. Yes, she had an affair. Yes, she said terrible things in emails. But saying something and doing something are different. Margaret Washington is alive because my client never actually tried to kill her. If Vanessa wanted her dead, Margaret would be dead. Instead, she's here testifying against a woman she's always hated. Don't let Margaret Washington's delusions send an innocent woman to prison. The jury deliberated for 3 days. 3 days of Margaret barely sleeping, barely eating, sitting in the Brooklyn brownstone, waiting for the phone to ring. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, the call came. The jury had reached a verdict. They rushed to the courthouse. The gallery was packed, media everywhere, cameras outside. Margaret walked in without the wheelchair this time. She wanted to stand when the verdict was read. Judge Morrison entered. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman, a black woman in her 50s, stood. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of attempted murder, how do you find? We find the defendant guilty. Margaret's knees buckled. Daniel caught her holding her up. On the charge of elder abuse, guilty. On the charge of financial exploitation, guilty. On the charge of assault with a deadly weapon, guilty. Vanessa collapsed at the defense table sobbing. Marcus Webb put his hand on her shoulder, but she shoved him away. Her perfect mask was gone, replaced by raw hatred. She turned and looked at Margaret. Their eyes met across the courtroom, and Vanessa mouthed 2 words, I win. Margaret didn't understand. The jury had just convicted her on all counts. But then Webb stood. Your Honor, I'd like to request immediate sentencing. My client wishes to allocate before the court. Allocation. The defendant's final statement before sentencing. Judge Morrison nodded. Mrs. Washington, you have the right to address the court. Do you wish to do so? Vanessa stood wiping her eyes. When she spoke, her voice was different. Colder. The victim act was gone. Yes, Your Honor, I have something to say. She turned to face Margaret. You won in court. Congratulations. But you lost where it matters. You lost your son. Daniel will never look at you the same way again. Every time he sees you, he'll remember that he failed you. That he let this happen. That guilt will eat him alive. You'll have won this case but destroyed your relationship with your son. So yes, I'm going to prison. But you're going to prison too. A prison of your son's guilt and your own trauma. We'll both be locked away for the rest of our lives. The courtroom was silent. Because Vanessa was right. The damage went beyond physical scars. The relationship between Daniel and Margaret had been fractured in ways that might never fully heal. Judge Morrison's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Mrs. Washington, I've been a judge for 30 years. I've seen many defendants try to have the last word, to inflict final wounds on their victims. But I won't let you leave this courtroom believing you've won anything." She leaned forward, her eyes hard. "Yes, you've caused damage. Yes, there's trauma that will take years to heal. But you've also done something you didn't intend. You've shown Margaret Washington and her son exactly what matters. Not money, not success, not empire building, but each other. You tried to destroy their bond, and instead you forced them to rebuild it stronger. That's not your victory. That's theirs." Judge Morrison picked up her gavel. "On the charge of attempted murder, I sentence you to 25 years in prison. On elder abuse, 10 years to run consecutively. On financial exploitation, 5 years consecutive. On assault, 5 years consecutive. Total sentence, 45 years in the New York State Correctional Facility. You'll be eligible for parole in 30 years, at which point you'll be 73 years old. The same age Margaret Washington would have been if you'd succeeded in killing her." The gavel came down. Final. Absolute. Vanessa screamed as the officers led her away, still screaming threats, still promising she'd appeal, still believing she could escape consequences. But the door closed behind her, and she was gone. Margaret stood in the courtroom, Daniel's arm around her, Rosa on her other side. They'd won. But the victory felt hollow, exhausting, like they'd survived a war, but lost something irreplaceable in the battle. 6 months later, the Pearl Button Foundation opened its doors in Harlem. The building was modest, but welcoming, with large windows and comfortable furniture. A staff of social workers, lawyers, and medical professionals worked to identify and rescue elderly victims of abuse. Margaret sat in her office on the second floor reviewing case files. She was stronger now, had gained back 20 pounds, could walk without assistance. But the nightmares still came. The fear of locked doors. The panic when meals were late. Trauma didn't disappear with a guilty verdict. Daniel knocked on her door, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He'd sold his company 6 months ago, walked away from billions to focus on the foundation. Some called it career suicide. He called it coming home. "Mom, we got another referral. Elderly man in Queens. His daughter-in-law controls all his money. Won't let him see his grandchildren unless he signs over his house. Send Marcus. He's good with financial exploitation cases." Daniel sat down. They'd fallen into a rhythm, working together, rebuilding trust one case at a time. But there was still distance. Still unspoken pain. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you ever wish I'd come home sooner before it got so bad?" Margaret set down her coffee. She'd been waiting for this question. "Every day. But I also understand why you didn't. You built something incredible. You changed the world, and I'm proud of you for that. But I almost lost you. Almost. But you didn't. I'm still here. And now, instead of building technology, you're building something better. You're building hope for people who've lost it. That matters more than any algorithm." Vanessa was right about one thing. The guilt, it doesn't go away. Good. Use it. Let it drive you to help others. That's how we survive trauma. We transform it into purpose. Daniel nodded, understanding. The guilt wouldn't disappear. But it could fuel something meaningful. That evening they hosted a dinner at the foundation. 20 survivors of elder abuse, their families, the staff who'd helped rescue them. Rosa cooked, making enough food to feed an army. Margaret moved through the crowd, talking to each person, hearing their stories. An 80-year-old woman named Claire grabbed Margaret's hand. "I saw you on the news. During the trial. I was in a similar situation. My son's girlfriend was stealing my medication, selling it. I thought I was crazy. But watching you testify gave me courage. I reported her. She's in jail now, because of you." Margaret squeezed Claire's hand. "No, because of you. I just showed you it was possible. You did the hard part." More people approached with similar stories. Margaret had become a symbol. A survivor who'd fought back and won. She'd turned her suffering into a movement. At the end of the night, Daniel found Margaret sitting alone in her office, looking at a small display case on her desk. Inside were 9 pearl buttons, cleaned and preserved, the ones they'd removed from her stomach. "I thought you'd want to throw those away." I did at first. But then I realized they represent something important: survival. Our family has survived slavery, poverty, racism, abuse. These buttons are proof that we don't break. We bend. We swallow pain. We endure. And then we rise. Daniel picked up the case, studying the buttons. "I want to create a memorial, a wall at the foundation where survivors can place objects that represent their survival. Jewelry, photos, letters, things that remind them they endured. The wall of endurance." "Exactly, and yours will be first. 9 pearl buttons that represent 9 generations of Washington women who refused to disappear." Margaret smiled. 10 generations now. Because we're not done yet. We have work to do. 1 year after the trial, Margaret stood before a congressional committee in Washington, D.C. She'd been invited to testify about elder abuse legislation. Rosa sat behind her, Daniel beside her, both ready to support her if she faltered. But Margaret didn't falter. She spoke clearly, powerfully, about the epidemic of elder abuse in America. About the need for better protections, better reporting systems, better support for victims. "I was lucky," she told the committee. "I had a son with resources. I had a housekeeper who risked everything to save me. I had a grandson who knew how to document evidence. Most victims don't have that. They die in silence in locked rooms, forgotten by the world. We have to do better." The committee listened. Bills were drafted. Laws were proposed. Margaret became a voice for the voiceless, traveling the country, sharing her story, demanding change. 2 years after the trial, Margaret received a letter. It was from Vanessa, writing from prison. Daniel wanted to throw it away, but Margaret insisted on reading it. The letter was not apologetic. Vanessa still claimed she was innocent, still insisted Margaret had exaggerated everything. But at the end, she wrote something that surprised Margaret. "I envy you. Not for winning, but because you have something I've never had. A family that loves you. A son who came back for you. I spent my whole life chasing money and status, thinking that would fill the emptiness. It never did. And now I have nothing. No money, no freedom. No one who cares if I live or die. You won because you were loved. And I lost because I never learned how to love anything but myself." Margaret read the letter twice, then filed it away. She felt no satisfaction in Vanessa's suffering, only sadness for a woman who'd destroyed herself trying to destroy others. 5 years after the trial, Daniel married again, a woman named Sarah who worked as a social worker at the foundation. She was kind, genuine, and the first time she met Margaret, she said, "I've heard so much about you. I hope I can earn your trust. I know that's not given lightly, and I don't expect it to happen quickly, but I'll work for it every day." Margaret liked her immediately. At the wedding, Margaret stood to give a toast. 5 years ago, I didn't think I'd survive to see this day. I was locked in a room, starving, swallowing buttons because I was desperate. But I survived. And not just survived, I lived. I built something meaningful. I helped people who needed help. I forgave my son, and he forgave himself. And now I get to watch him start a new chapter with a woman who sees him not for his money or his status, but for his heart. She raised her glass. "To Sarah and Daniel, may your love be stronger than any challenge. May you show up for each other on the hard days, not just the easy ones. And may you never forget that family isn't about perfection. It's about presence." The room erupted in applause. 10 years after the trial, Margaret Washington was 78 years old. The Pearl Button Foundation had expanded to 30 cities. They'd helped rescue over 2,000 elderly victims of abuse. They'd changed laws in 15 states. They'd created a model that was being replicated across the country. Margaret's health was declining. Her heart was weak, damaged by the months of starvation. The doctors said she had maybe 2 years left, maybe less. But she wasn't afraid. She'd already survived the worst. Everything now was borrowed time. On a warm afternoon in May, Margaret sat in the Brooklyn brownstones' backyard. Rosa sat beside her, both of them watching Daniel's children play. Two grandchildren, a boy and a girl named after Margaret's parents. "Miss Margaret, can I ask you something?" Always Rosa. "Do you ever regret it?" Fighting back? "Sometimes I wonder if it would have been easier to just let it end. To not go through the trial, the testimony, all that pain." Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice soft but certain. "Every day of fighting was worth it. Not because I got justice, though, that mattered, but because I showed my son that love is worth fighting for, that family is worth enduring pain for, that survival isn't just about living, it's about living with purpose." She watched her grandchildren laugh, chasing each other through the grass. "If I'd given up, they never would have existed. Daniel wouldn't have met Sarah. The foundation wouldn't exist. 2,000 people would still be trapped. My story gave them permission to tell theirs." Rosa nodded, understanding. "You turned your pain into power." "No, I turned my pain into purpose. Power fades. Purpose endures." Margaret Washington died peacefully in her sleep 3 months later, surrounded by family. Daniel held one hand. Rosa, the other Sarah, reading poetry aloud. The grandchildren played quietly in the corner, too young to fully understand, but old enough to know something sacred was happening. Her last words were to Daniel. "You came back. That's all that mattered. You came back." At her funeral, the church was packed. Survivors from the foundation filled every pew. Strangers who'd been inspired by her story traveled from across the country. Politicians, activists, ordinary people whose lives had been touched by her courage. Daniel gave the eulogy. "My mother survived poverty, racism, abuse, and neglect. She survived because she had something that couldn't be taken from her. Dignity. She never let circumstance define her worth. And when someone tried to make her invisible, she refused. She stood up. She spoke out. She survived. And in surviving, she taught us all how to be human." He paused, his voice breaking. "I failed her once. I let success blind me to her suffering. I wasn't there when she needed me most, and I'll carry that for the rest of my life. But she forgave me. And in forgiving me, she taught me that redemption is always possible if we're willing to do the work." At the burial, they placed 9 pearl buttons on her casket, each one representing a generation of Washington women who'd survived the impossible. And as they lowered her into the ground, Margaret's great-granddaughter, just 7 years old, stepped forward and placed a 10th button on the dirt. "For Grandma Margaret," she said. "So she knows we're still here, still surviving, still strong." The Pearl Button Foundation continued without Margaret. Daniel ran it with the same dedication she'd shown, expanding programs, saving lives, changing laws. Every new location featured a wall of endurance where survivors placed objects representing their survival. And at the center of every wall was a photograph of Margaret Washington holding 9 pearl buttons, with a quote beneath. "They tried to make me swallow my history. Instead, I transformed it into hope." Vanessa Washington died in prison at age 68, 17 years into her sentence. No one claimed her body. She was buried in the prison cemetery, her grave marked only with a number. She'd won nothing, lost everything, destroyed herself trying to destroy others. Margaret Washington, by contrast, had won everything that mattered. Not wealth, not status, not revenge. She'd won her son back. She'd won her dignity. She'd won purpose from pain. And in the end, that was the only victory that endured. 10 generations of Washington women had survived the impossible. Slavery, poverty, racism, abuse. Each generation swallowing pain so the next could breathe free. Margaret had swallowed pearl buttons in desperation, but her children and grandchildren would wear them with pride, knowing they represented the strength it takes to survive when the world wants you to disappear. The buttons would endure. The story would endure. And the legacy of a woman who refused to be erased would inspire survivors for generations to come. That was Margaret Washington's final gift to the world, not her suffering, but her refusal to let suffering have the last word.